And we are live and back with another great episode of Liam Picks Fights. I appreciate each and every one of you guys for sticking around. I know we were supposed to get started at 6:30, but I forgot my laptop, essential to the show. Had to go back, and now I've reported to you guys from Cleveland, Ohio. I've reported to you from New York, and now we're reporting to you from the great state of New Jersey. So if I want to take some live action here during the show, I can do so legally and responsibly, as I always tell you to do. But we're going to be breaking down UFC 267 from a betting perspective, and I didn't decide to do this alone. I brought the big guns. I try and bring a great panel every week. I think I've outdone myself once again. We've got making his debut on the stream and one of the very first guys to give me an opportunity in this space. We'll always appreciate him for it. Manpreet, MMA Lock of the Night. Welcome aboard, buddy. How are you?
Dude, I was more than happy to answer the call once you actually you wrangled me to do this show, man. I'm very excited to do it. Obviously, we got a great panel of guys to do it with as well. But yeah, got a solid UFC 267 ahead of us, and I can't wait to break it down with you guys. So let's just fucking get to it, man.
Absolutely, buddy. I'm giddy for this one. This one's going to be a lot of fun. And we brought along another first-time guest on the show, somebody I communicate with in the DMs, but always appreciate this man's point of view. Shawn Orr, welcome to the program, buddy. Appreciate you being here.
How you guys doing today?
Doing very well, boss. Grateful for your presence. And once again, making his return to the program, the GOAT, Tajik Bey. Been on a roll with us, Tajik. How you doing, my friend?
Doing great. Thanks for having me back, Liam. Hello, everybody in the chat. And hello, Shawn. Hello, Locke.
Hey, nice to meet you.
Very mutual.
Awesome. All right, boys. So we will not waste any time here. We will get this show underway. I will just let everybody know as we get started, the show's brought to you by PrizePicks. Just missed by a hair on the Contender Series. Quinones wasn't able to get him out of there. Hit him with everything. Can't ask him for much more than that. But I also had the over on the fantasy score for Gadzi in the main event, and by goodness, he crushed that. Scared me there for a second with the leg lock pull, but if you guys decide to take action on PrizePicks, all the information's below. Liam is a code that will get you 100% deposit match up to $100. Now, with that being said, we can move on to the first fight of the night. And guys, normally this would be on a main card, on a fight night. Tagir Ulanbekov, Allan Nascimento. Nascimento fought Paiva on the Contender Series, looked pretty good in that spot, came away with a split decision. Man, who hasn't fought to a split decision with Ali and Paiva? But also, Tagir Ulanbekov, pretty hype prospect on the other side. I'm going to kick it to my man Locke first. Locke, how do you feel about this matchup, and are you going to take action one way or the other?
Well, first and foremost, I was left with a bad taste in my mouth with Tagir Ulanbekov in his UFC debut, just fading Bruno Silva with chalk, because I just didn't think that Bruno Silva at that time was as good as he is now, right? Looking back at that fight now, you see that Bruno Silva is making improvements and he's actually a legitimate 125-pounder. So I don't feel as bad about it anymore. But Tagir, man, 5'7", 125-pounder. The guy uses his range pretty well at times, but when he needs to, is able to get the fight to the ground and do some good work from there. Good scrambler, usually does end up on top, usually is ahead of his opponents at time. But with Nascimento, he's going to have to worry about the ground game here. I do think that Nascimento is kind of live, but I find it difficult to believe that he'll actually be able to get Ulanbekov out of there with any sort of submission off of his back or anything like that. The spot that actually intrigues me the most is Ulanbekov via decision, which is roughly around even money at this point, plus 100 or so, depending on where you're looking at. I'm not paying the chalk on Ulanbekov at minus 350, especially with the amount of experience that Nascimento has coming into this game. It's not just like he's just this Brazilian they picked up off the side of the road. The guy's fought some pretty decent competition on the regional scene. So, it's hard to put Nascimento away. If I'm not mistaken, he hasn't been finished in his entire career. But I think that Ulanbekov will be his toughest test to date. I like the decision prop, like I said, plus 100. Don't even mind the over as well. But Ulanbekov is going to be my play here. And that should start off, the plethora of Russians that will probably be getting their hand raised this weekend.
Absolutely. I mean, just by sheer numbers alone, there's got to be a certain number of them that come through, right? They have freaking a Russian in every fight on this card. Shawn, how do you feel about this matchup? Is it one that you're interested in from a betting perspective?
Not really particularly. I do think the line is pretty wide. I think that Nascimento is a game opponent. One thing I noticed with him is that he kind of does this peekaboo defense, but he doesn't really move his head off the center line effectively. I think that it's going to be tough for him to deal with the range in this fight. Although I do notice that the kicks are going to be there for him. So if he does employ a kick-heavy game plan, maybe he could slow the fight down. But overall, for me, it's going to be a pass. I actually think a finish might be live, to be honest with you, because both guys do throw quite a bit of volume. And particularly Nascimento, again, he doesn't really have great defense. But overall, I just think when you've got a giant platter of fights ahead of you, it's easy to pass on trying to fade a Russian where you're paying a Russian tax on the line.
That makes an absolute ton of sense to me as well. Tajik, do you feel the same way? Do you like Ulanbekov in this matchup? Are you looking for an underdog shot? How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I think it's a close matchup, you know, and I agree with Shawn that they're closer than the odds suggest. And so for Tagir has this tendency to make the fights close, you know. And I think with Bruno Silva, to be honest with you, I scored it actually for Bruno. I thought Bruno won. He landed more powerful shots. And Tagir's chin was there to be hit, and so but having said that, right, he's a combat sambo, lifelong fighter. He's a protege of Khabib, so he probably landed way earlier than everybody else. He trained hard, he adapted well, and for Nascimento, I can say that he's a Muay Thai practitioner since the age of 15. But his ground game is actually pretty interesting, and I would have said it's an advantage, but he gets a little bit more adventurous in those scrambles. He goes for leg locks, and so it's kind of like, I don't know if this is where he might catch Tagir, to be honest with you. I mean, I think the fact that he tries to take the grappling approach more often than standing is probably going to be his detriment. I like Tagir here a little bit more now, day by day. I think he takes it. I don't know if he finishes Nascimento. Nascimento is tough. So I'm gonna take Tagir Ulanbekov, and I agree with Manpreet that I think by decision is quite likely. So I'm gonna take him by decision.
I'm just going to add something here real quickly, if you don't mind me asking. This is actually the third time that Tagir is going to be fighting somebody taller than him. Normally, he's the taller guy. This is the third time he's going to be fighting somebody taller than him. So just another aspect of the fight that people should consider when making a choice here.
Very interesting. And, the other thing I'll mention is I can agree that I thought Tagir was a little bit underwhelming in that UFC debut, but I always give people just a little bit of a pass because we've seen so many outlier performances in people's UFC debut. And so I think that that's something to consider here. When I watch Tagir's regional tape, he looks pretty darn solid to me. Overall, Nascimento is not a bad fighter by any means. He's a blood and guts guy. He's really tough. He's scrambly on the ground. He's not going to just get held down in a position. But I do think overall he's going to end up underneath more often than not in this fight. Ulanbekov, again, just kind of pulls off these random acts of strength where he muscles somebody up into the air and slams them. And those are the kind of things that judges do take into consideration. If you just lightly drag somebody down against the cage and they stand back up, you really didn't accomplish anything. But if you pick somebody up and drop them on their head, their neck and their chest, that hurts. That takes the air out of you. It is effective in that way. So I think his wrestling's a little bit more effective. I think, sometimes you see Nascimento try and muscle people up for his takedown attempts. And I just don't think that's going to work against Tagir. Number one, because he's tall, he can get his hips away. But number two, I just think he's a little bit more adept in those positions. So I think ultimately Tagir ends up on top more often than not if the fight goes to the ground. And I expect it to go to the ground, for a decent portion of each round. So I think that if the fight ends up on the feet, it might get a little greasier. But overall, I like Tagir. I don't like the price. I'm not going to play it. I'm going to pass. So we can move along to the next fight here, which is another very Russian-sounding name, but it's a different flag. We've got Damir Ismagulov is taking on Magomed Mustafaev. There's the Russian. And this should be a banger, to be honest with you. Again, another fight that would be top 2 or 3 on a fight night card on a typical night. So Damir Ismagulov, 1 career loss to his name. That's something that you don't often see in the second fight of the night when somebody's got 24 professional fights. So Magomed Mustafaev on the other side. He's like the UFC fighter that fights once a year, you know, or once every 2 years. He shows up like a mystical force every once in a while to claim a scalp for the ages, like Fiziev. So I think that this is a really fun one, boys. I'm going to kick it to my man Tajik first. We'll mix it up. Tajik, how do you feel about this fight?
I feel great about this fight. Damir is actually like ethnic Kazakh out of Russia, right? So that's why he carries both flag. You know, he's a pride of, you know, Kazakhstan, and you know he spent his you know, entire life in Russia. So I think he's great, right? He's been on a tear in the UFC. You know, he's been winning, and I think he's on a 4-fight winning streak, right? If not more. What is he on right now? But yeah, but having said that, it's a little bit. So his keys to victory is that, you know, his takedown defense is pretty solid. Yeah, he's on a 4-fight winning streak. His boxing is pretty solid. You know, his takedown defense is pretty good as well. And so he's coming here into this matchup, you know, a heavy favorite, and I do not disagree. I actually disagree with these odds, and I think Mustafaev has a chance in this fight, because with Mustafaev is that he has wrestling that he can offer to Damir. He's a little bit more athletic. His volume is a problem, you know, for Magomed himself. But Mustafaev, I think wrestling can be a problem for Damir. And if he mixes up his his strikes, and I think he can cause Damir a lot of troubles. And I think Damir has very fewer ways to victory in this fight. That's why for me Magomed is such an interesting pick here. I think it goes to a decision. I'm gonna go ahead and pick Magomed Mustafaev to win this one by decision, and on what it sounds like, it's going to be a big upset, because I think he's quite heavy of an underdog at this moment.
That is correct. So Tajik taking the first underdog shot of the night. Shawn, is this a shot that you're going to be taking as well, or do you like the favorite, Damir Ismagulov?
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo a lot of what Tajik has said, because Damir, you've got to look at his last two opponents. They were two guys who basically just stood there to get volumed and pointed. Moises and who was the other guy? Alves. They both basically just sat there and allowed Damir to get his volume off. Now, I do think it is a dog shot that you would take that is on thinner margins, because it's going to be predicated on Mustafaev being able to get takedowns, which, for his credit, if you look at the Brad Riddell fight, Mustafaev is wrestling very hard for all 3 rounds. So it didn't look like he had a massive cardio concern for me with that kind of a game plan. And Damir hasn't really been challenged in that way that I've seen so far in the UFC. Also, I've noticed that Damir, he has this tendency where when he's not leading the dance and popping out his longer punches, he has a tendency to kind of shell up when heavier amounts of volume are coming at him when the pocket crashes. And we've seen Mustafaev a couple times, once he gets away from his kicking game and stupid spinning back fists and stupid spinning kicks, he does actually crash the pocket quite nicely, and he does land heavy, heavy punches on people. Now, Damir's build, he hasn't really struggled with this, but Damir's build for me doesn't look like the type of guy that can take heavy artillery if it's in the pocket and it gets crashed. So I'm not thinking that it's out of the question that Mustafaev can hurt him at one point in this fight. So I do like Tajik's play where it's decision, because I do think ultimately Damir is savvy enough to keep this fight going, because he's very technical, very skilled. But I just don't see really any uniqueness to his game. And I do think we're getting a bit of fool's gold here with his last 2 matchups. One thing I'll also mention is that I think it's a good spot to sit and wait, because I am expecting a lot of parlays to come in on Damir. So I am anticipating that Mustafaev, his line is going to get even more blown out That's my personal thinking. I've already cashed out on 2 bets on Mustafaev with that thinking in mind. But yeah, my official pick is going to be Mustafaev to win by a wrestling-based decision.
Wow. And we've got plus 230 hanging on multiple books across the market here, guys. So, people should have access to that if that's something you're interested in. But I'm going to also try and take that approach of waiting if I'm going to get involved here, because I think that the balloon might continue to inflate. Locke, how do you feel about this fight?
I'll play a little bit of a contrarian take here on the Ismagulov side, but not to the extent of saying that he is worthy of that heavy chalk price that he's currently at. Because at times he does fight close to the level of his competition. At times, sometimes he kind of does let the fight get by. But I'm just such a fan of his striking style. He's very smooth from the outside, good combinations. In my opinion, one of the dark horses in this lightweight division. In regards to the Mustafaev side of things, there are certain parts of his game that you can take from the last fight with Ismagulov with Alves, right? Alves is explosive as well too. There are moments where he'll try to, crash the pocket, land heavy shots, and it was successful for him. Like early in that first round where he dropped him, but then he obviously gave up the rest of that round, pretty much getting ground and pounded. And then in the third round, he was pretty much just putting the pressure on Ismagulov, and I thought Alves did a decent job in that round as well. It could be in part to Ismagulov's extended layoff between, his last 2 fights that, he's just trying to shake off the ring rust. And it's very tough to do that when you have an explosive guy like Rafael Alves in front of you. And Mustafaev brings those explosive tendencies as well into this fight too. So, it is a bit of a concern for me that Mustafaev could potentially catch him with something. So that's something that's definitely weighing on my mind. But the Ismagulov decision, roughly around plus 110, is kind of intriguing me as well. I do think that he could go out there and, work his game. I think if he just stays on the outside, does enough with his defensive wrestling here to keep this fight in the striking realm, I think he'll land the better shots in the striking and land the volume as well in the striking as well, which will probably, lean it more so to his side. The money line, though, I want nothing to do with it. That's just way too wide, especially considering how close this fight's going to end up being, which is why I'm more confident in taking the decision prop. Mustafaev, say what you want about him. I've heard people say that he does gas out later in fights as well, but he shows a good enough durability to stay in the fight. So I think that we'll see this fight go the full 15 minutes, but I think we'll see a little bit more output from the Ismagulov side, shut down the takedowns, keep this fight on the feet, pepper him from the outside, and take home a decision. So I am eyeing that decision prop very closely. I might pull the trigger on it officially, not 100% sure yet.
Fair enough. This is a fight that I haven't had a tremendous investment in. I looked at the odds. It didn't strike me as something I wanted to get involved in on the favorite side. I remember not being as impressed by Damir as I wanted to be when I looked at the tape. But granted, I'm going to give a plug right now. Locke, the name of the service is blanking right now.
Tape Index.
Tape Index. Yes, sir. Oh, my goodness, guys. What an innovation, and really has made studying tape for these events a lot easier. So I'm going to rapid fire through some Damir Ismagulov after I'm done recording here to refresh my brain on it and see whether I want to get on the fade train or whether I want to just pass this fight entirely. But 2 opinions I really respect on the Mustafaev side. That is at least going to make me consider whether I want to take some betting action myself. So we can move to the next fight here on the card. And we've got, maybe the outlier on the event. We've got Andre Petroski is back here, fresh off the Michael Gilmore victory, very unsatisfying Michael Gilmore victory. And so we go from the 23-1 Damir Ismagulov to the 3-2 Yaozong on the other end of this matchup. But, I don't think that Yaozong is out of the running here. I think that Petroski obviously has skills on the ground, but I think that he's a huge cardio liability from everything I've seen from him. I think his striking leaves a lot to be desired. Granted, he's pretty powerful and willing to throw, but he's also pretty dang hittable. Doesn't have great hand positioning, doesn't have great head movement. I think all that could be problems. And Yaozong, for whatever his faults, he is coming down in weight class. He looks like he's at a more appropriate weight and size. He looks like he's in phenomenal shape. And I think that Yaozong, I did end up taking a small shot, 0.91 units here at plus 200. It was the best price available on the market. And it's just because I don't trust Petroski over 7.5 minutes should the fight get there. everything I've seen about his cardio seems to taper off around that point. And, especially somebody who uses a grappling heavy game plan, that means they're going to empty the tank. And if he doesn't get the finish, I think he's going to be left bereft. So we're going to have to wait and see. But plus 200, run it. Locke, we'll kick it to you next. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, not a lot of confidence on the Petroski side here, especially with the difficulty he had in terms of putting Michael Gilmore away in that first round. Luckily for him, he was able to get that third round victory. But there's nothing from the Yaozong side that really makes me enticed to go out there and play that plus 200 on this spot, other than just the odds, right? Like, I'm just not sold on him. He's been out of the cage for 3 years. He's finally fighting at the weight class he probably should. It seems like he put a lot of emphasis on the wrestling over the last 3 years, especially, going up against Allan, or supposedly going up against Allan Amedovski. It seemed like that was his point of focus, but I think he's going to be in some deep shit if this fight hits the ground, because I think that the difference in jiu-jitsu is going to be clearly evident once this fight hits the ground. However, if it does make it outside of the first round, I think we'll see much more resistance from the Yaozong side than we did from Gilmore the past fight. So that does give me a little bit of pause, especially in terms of wanting to pay minus 230 here for Petroski. I'd rather just take the round one Petroski plus 270, round one, or even Petroski sub, which I think is plus 250-ish, inside the distance plus 100. But it wouldn't also be a bad idea to live bet this either, right? Just let Petroski put him through the ringer for the first 5 minutes, and then maybe get a better price on Yaozong going into the second round. That's where I'd feel a little bit more comfortable putting that money on Yaozong. But again, I don't have confidence in this guy. The guy's 3-2. Like, who knows what we're going to see from him with a 3-year layoff? Improvements, lack of improvements, who the fuck knows? We got to see him inside the cage. And I think that this is going to be his toughest test, especially if this fight hits the ground. So, Petroski round one sub, that's kind of where I'm going. But I will maybe take a little bit of a shot on who, if in the live betting market, if this goes into the second round. But pick is going to be Petroski first round.
You're saying 2 years off on the younger guy on fresh new supplements. Come on, Locke. Shawn, how do you feel about this one, buddy?
Yeah, so I don't know what the UFC sees in Petroski, but it seems like they've been really trying hard to give him a cupcake of a schedule. I mean, Gilmore was like a laughably lopsided matchup. Now, when we're talking from a betting perspective, I'm going to echo a lot of what Locke says. The Shanghai PI has been notoriously awful in the UFC over the course of the past 2 years. I mean, they have barely racked up any wins at all. So it's very indicative.
Throw in the contender series. Throw in the contender series, right? We just saw a couple guys.
Exactly. So it's very indicative of the level of training that they have over there, and also where MMA is at in China overall. Now, Petroski definitely has these cardio concerns, so I'm going to echo exactly what Locke has said, which is if who does happen to survive the first round, you can kind of take a pulse on what's going on in the fight and see if who is going to be worth a live bet. Now, if I had to predict, though, of what's actually going to happen here, I think that Petroski is probably going to submit him by arm triangle in round one. I think that Petroski just has very high-level jiu-jitsu training partners. He is very good for about 1 or 2 explosive takedowns. We've seen who get grappled in previous fights, but he hasn't really faced somebody with the jiu-jitsu acumen as Petroski. Now, that's not to say that Petroski can't lose this fight, and I think that that's very live. It's just make sure you hedge your bets on both sides for guaranteed profit, in my opinion. That's how I'm going to play the fight. I'm going to play it exactly like Locke has. And I'm still so salty that Amedovski fight has fallen through, because I was one of those early – I had a max bet on who. I had like plus 170 or plus 160. I max bet him. I think he was going to kill Amedovski. So I'm really sad that didn't come to fruition. But yeah, Petroski is the pick. I think it's submission round one, arm triangle.
That all adds up to me as well. And, if Petroski does win this fight, I think that's the prescription. So I would bet accordingly, and I might even look at what my hedge opportunity is. But last time I was at the casino, they were very, very hip to the Petroski sub 1 angle. I will let you know that. Tajik, how do you feel about this one?
I feel like, rapping and freestyling about this fight. We talked about it in the backstage that, I'll try my free flow right now in identifying my pick. So here goes nothing, right? Um, his style is impetuous. His defense is impregnable. UFC is where he belongs. He's tall and strong. He's one and only Yaozong. Mic drop.
Yes, sir.
How
Yes,
did I do,
sir.
guys? It's absolutely, those are random thought. Like,
That's a 10. That's a 10.
okay, I knew it's gonna be a success. So in terms of the fight itself, I think there is no reasonable, like, there's no way to figure out where who is right now. Right, he's been away for so long, and for Petroski, again, it was a liability, right? Like his cardio is liability. So I actually found underhooks of Yaozong to be pretty serviceable. I think in the clinch, he can he can wrestle pretty okay. I don't believe in his Greco-Roman background. I think it's a myth, and I've said this before. So I think it's the fight where anything can happen, and so if that's that. Then I'm gonna go ahead and pick who to actually submit Petrovsky by a standing guillotine choke. So that's gonna be my official pick.
I love it. I love it, Tajik.
Hey,
Drops the hammer.
He wouldn't be able to show his face in the gym if that happened. So
yeah,
Tajik, you're predicting the end of this man's life.
I mean, they can just take away his belt, downgrade him, or like whatever they do. I mean, I hope he does well, right? I mean, it's understandable, like where he is, just, I mean, like I said, I think he should be a favorite, but it's just such an unpredictable fight. And if that's that, then then why not who but by standing guillotine? So let's go.
I agree.
I'm all in now. I'm going to have to find a bookie that will take action on who by standing guillotine at plus 10,000. And if I could do that, we're all in. Now, that being said, we can move on to the next fight on the card where, again, I'm going to be taking a little bit of action here. Talk about sub round one. I bet on sub round one, Makwan Amirkhani at plus 1,700. And it's not to say that I think Makwan's like a lock in this fight. He's the furthest thing from a lock. If you ever watch Makwan's fights, you can tell that, sometimes Makwan is on and sometimes Makwan's not. But I think that when he is on and when he fights smart, he does have a really effective front headlock series. He's pretty dang good at picking people up and putting them down. I'd like to see him get better at putting the hooks in from the back. But overall, I think that Makwan's grappling here should be a little bit more effective. We've seen in the past Lerone Murphy get taken down, and it wasn't by somebody that could control him. And I think in this matchup, at least for the first round, Shane Burgos, who's pretty tremendous as an anti-grappler, and ended up punishing Makwan in really embarrassing and horrific ways over the course of that fight. And Shane's a local guy, so I want to salute him for doing so. But just to be honest, Makwan was throwing him around for the first part of that fight, and Shane Burgos is a massive featherweight. So I think that was really impressive to me physically, although I knew the fight was over because I knew he was spending too much energy. I think if he could be a little more efficient with the takedowns here, he could probably get him out of there in the first round. Makwan is super dangerous, very good on the ground. I think if the fight gets extended, Makwan's going to start to look like crap. Makwan does not throw enough volume on the feet to be an effective striker. And on top of that, he gets caught looking a lot. Edson was just catching him over and over, watching his work after he throws a combination, and then Edson's there to really punish him with the stinging combination that comes behind it. So I think that Lerone Murphy, I get why he's a favorite here, but I think that the line has swelled up a little bit beyond where I cap it. So I have 0.3 units on Makwan at plus 275 and 0.2 units on Makwan round one sub at plus 1,700. And with that being said, I'm going to kick it to my man Tajik. How do you feel about this matchup, and do you have a freestyle prepared?
No,
Drop the beat, Lock.
I flow is random, right? It doesn't it doesn't come from like rewriting down the scripts and stuff like that. I don't write the scripts, so so far, so no freestyle for this fight. But I think I agree with Mbe. that to me, I feel like Murphy is overrated. I think De Andrade won that fight against him. I actually, I think I saw that Zubair Hugov also won that fight. So to me, he should be 1 and 2. He has great, I think his stand-up is serviceable. It's okay. I understand. His takedown defense is solid. But he's coming across, Amirkhani, and Amirkhani, has a good, actually decent control time, and if he manages to take Murphy down, I think there's a chance that for some time, not eternally, he can hold him down. And your pick is Liam is interesting, the submission, because I think the only round that he can submit Lerone in would be first, because I think after that, he's probably gonna guess out. But he's working on his cardio. I thought he looked decent in the Kirk fight. I thought he won that fight. So when I think that Lerone is overrated, and Makwan can offer him a competitive fight, I think it's another one of those fights that's gonna go to a decision. I don't know who wins this one. I think it's gonna be pretty close. I'm thinking maybe Amirkhani can pull out 2 rounds, and it's gonna go to some kind of greasy split decision. But I am gonna go ahead and pick Amirkhani in this fight, if Lerone is real, I think we're gonna find out. If he gets past Amirkhani, I think it's gonna be a good test for him. So yeah, my official pick is gonna be Amirkhani by split decision.
And the other thing is, when you look at some of these opponents, he's been fighting smaller guys a little bit. Lerone Murphy, Douglas Da Silva de Andrade is like a tiny person, whereas Makwan is going to be taller than him. And have a competitive reach. So Lerone obviously still has a reach advantage. He has a very long reach for the division, but I do think that that's an interesting aspect of the fight. As I kick it over to my man Shawn, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, so I know Amirkhani's been working on his cardio, but the guy clearly smokes cigarettes because he does get gassed every single fight. That being said, you got to look at what Lerone has faced so far, and I do agree with Tajik that he is overrated. I don't like how he looks in the grappling element of really any fight. He hasn't really faced a good control grappler yet. He has faced people that can put him up against the fence or take him down for brief moments. He has actually been flattened out in a fight. Now, I think that the fact that he stands up, giving up his back, is a big red flag. I think a guy like Amirkhani, who has a good choke game, that's pretty much what he leans on, I think is very live to submit Lerone Murphy. So I do like your play, and I'm going to be on that. That being said, I don't think winning a decision is outside of the question. We do have to remember that damage is probably the highest marks on scorecards for judges. So Amirkhani throws very little volume. His striking is absolutely terrible. And even when he ends up on top of you, he doesn't really throw too much. So you're basically relying on Amirkhani to hit probably 2 takedowns in round 1 and probably at least 1 takedown in round 2 as they start to slow down. I don't think he's going to win round 3 by any stretch of the imagination. So I do agree with Tajik. I think this is going to come down to possibly a greasy split decision. I think when we're talking betting, we need to talk about value, which I do think in that case, when you've got a very hot athletic prospect that everybody is juicing to the gills at the betting line, you do have to take Amirkhani if you're going to play this fight, or you have to take Lerone Murphy by decision, or you have to take Lerone Murphy by round 3 decision. I think that those are kind of the 3 spots plus the submission where you would have to kind of hone in on. But I'm going to predict Amirkhani submits him, actually. I think it's going to happen. I don't think round 2 is out of the question, but I do think it's going to be round 1. Rear naked choke.
Let's go. Let's go. I love when I bring a sharp on this show and they line up with me. I respect when they don't, and I got to take that when it comes as well. But love when my man Shawn and I are on the same wave here. Amirkhani, sub. Let's get it going. MMA lock of the night. How do you feel, my brother? Tell me you're on the same wave.
You guys pretty much hit the nail on the head in terms of every way to break down this fight. The only thing that I'm going to add is for the Murphy side, yeah, you can't bet the money line. There's no justification to that. Round 3 is going to be the intriguing one if it gets that far, right? Like, I was impressed with his ability to stop the takedowns of Tuhugov in that 3rd round. Even though Tuhugov landed 2 takedowns in that fight, he accumulated a grand total of 0 minutes of control time in that 3rd round. He was able to pop right back up to his feet, and every time that Tuhugov tried to push him up against the cage and try to get a takedown, he did a good job in terms of breaking the grip, trying to get back to distance and get his own striking off. Now, Amirkhani has been in that cardio death mode and survived to the full 15 minutes against guys like Edson Barboza and even in his last fight against Kamuela Kirk. But I think the difference here is going to be the fact that I think that Lerone will be able to stop the takedowns late and possibly put it on him and possibly get him out of there. But this is a props type of, unless you're betting Amirkhani money line, which I'm not hating on anybody for doing that, but I feel like this is more of a props fight than anything. And the couple props that I've highlighted here that I'll probably be looking at is Murphy KO plus 150. I wish there was a little bit more on that. But Murphy round 3 plus 850, like Shawn was talking about. I think that's a good spot. And then Amirkhani by sub plus 850, which is fucking ridiculous in my opinion. Again, I know, I don't know, I don't have access to any books that allow those like round 1 via sub props. So if you're like me and don't have access to any of those, I think just even taking the sub prop at plus 850 is just ridiculous. I thought it would be closer to maybe plus 400, plus 500. So we're getting some value on that in my opinion. But plus 850 for sub, that's probably the way that I go. But the last thing I'll say about this fight, under 2.5. I like that. I think that's a decent spot. Plus 100. But my concern comes is if that finish comes from Lerone Murphy in the 3rd round and it's past that 2.5 mark, right? That's where you're going to kind of get stung. So maybe not getting too greedy and taking the under and just taking the fight doesn't go to decision, eat a little bit of that juice, right? I think it's going to get up to maybe 120, 125 or something like that. That's probably the way to go here. I'm expecting violence here. Amirkhani either early sub or Murphy gets him out of there in the 3rd round. So yeah, I will likely sprinkle that Amirkhani sub plus 850 and then take some of that Lerone Murphy round 3 as well, around that plus 800. Hopefully I end up coming out with some money in my pockets.
Absolutely, brother. And that's what you got to do sometimes. I like and I believe in having a hedge. If there's a smart one available, if it's a dichotomous fight, if you got a gasser, that's oftentimes a fight where you can look for those kind of smart hedge opportunities. I think if you're on Makwan round 1 sub or sub like I am, Murphy by decision is not a bad hedge either. I just don't believe that Makwan's getting finished in this fight in all likelihood. Even when Burgos finished him, it was like the most torturous game plan for somebody who gasses, where he refused to do anything except hold him down and punch his body. So it's like, that's gonna finish him. It's like, but outside of that, Makwan is a really tough bastard. So I think even if it goes poorly for him and he's getting tooled up a little bit, he'll be there for the whole 15. So I think Makwan sub or we're going the distance. With that being said, guys, we can move right along to the next fight on the card here. A fight that I do not have tremendous investment in. I feel like, again, it's one of the lower level fights on this card. We got Shamil, Gamzatov, and Michal Oleksiejczuk. I tried my best. I appreciate you, buddy. And whether that's true or not, I'm going to take it to the bank. Locke, how do you feel about this fight? Is this one that you're interested in from a betting perspective, or are you like me, a little lukewarm on this matchup?
Yeah, I'm kind of feeling you on this one too. I don't feel too strongly about it. I credit anybody that was able to get in on Oleksiejczuk a little bit earlier, when his line was closer to that plus 150, plus 160 range. It seems like one of those fights it'll probably go over. I think the only person that has the ability to finish this fight is probably going to be Oleksiejczuk. I've seen the KO prop roughly around plus 600, which is not too bad. But given his ability to just move forward and keep his opponent on his back foot, I love that type of style from a fighter. And his boxing is not too bad either, right? Like, he does not discriminate in terms of like headhunting. He goes to the body quite often. He tries to slow down his opponent. And the Gamzatov, like, if you're expecting a Khabib type of Russian, you're in for a rude awakening, because the guy, more so likes to kind of lean on that striking. Has some clean, crisp technique for sure. But I think that if he's going to decide to go out there and just strike with Oleksiejczuk, I think it's going to cause him some troubles here. I think he's going to have to go to that wrestling to beat a guy like Oleksiejczuk. again, we've seen in the past, Oleksiejczuk doesn't really have the greatest game off of his back. So if Gamzatov has watched any of his fights, he should know that, let's try to get a takedown here and try to secure this fight rather than just being backpedaled the entire time, because Oleksiejczuk gives up no ground. That guy just moves forward, doesn't care what you're throwing at him. And I feel like we're going to see that in this fight. So the couple of things that I kind of looked at was Oleksiejczuk by decision plus 285. I just think optically speaking, he's going to do well for what the judges are going to be looking for. And the over 2.5 at minus 170, I don't think is too shabby either. But again, no strong feelings on this side. Pick is Oleksiejczuk decision.
Very nice. Very nice. And we kick it to Shawn. Do you have strong feelings one way or the other on this one?
You're muted.
I mean, it's not a fight that I'm targeting, but I am starting to think that Gamzatov is starting to maybe have some value because the line has been moving against him. I'm going to continue to wait. Gamzatov is kind of one of these sturdy, stay on the outside, Russian, point fighting kickboxers. Whereas I'm just going to say Michal. Is it Michael? Michal?
Come on, Shawn.
Michal. He's got some good boxing, but I just think he's really undersized for the division. So I don't think a cage pushing kind of grappling element is out of the question here. It's just really hard to feel strongly one way or the other. But as the line starts to creep more towards Gamzatov being kind of evens, I think I'm going to take some action because I do think in this type of a matchup, I do trust the intelligence, the sturdiness, and the ranginess of Gamzatov and his size. So I'm gonna wait, but my official pick is probably going to be Gamzatov by decision.
Fair enough. And Tajik, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I agree with Shawn and with Manpreet. I actually like I like Michal, to be honest with you, to win this fight. I like his head movement, I like his hands. I think he's going to be faster than Shamil. And then with Shawn, I agree with the fact that, if the line flips, which is possible, then Shamil is definitely a value play, right? Because if he presses him, clinches him, tries to take him down, he's not that type of guy. I think actually his cardio could be a little bit of problem. I would like to see him tested actually, towards the 3 rounds to find out for sure. Yeah, my pick is gonna be Michal by decision, and yeah, so I'm not gonna have much action on Gamzatov unless the line flips. So it would be interesting to see. So I'm with Shawn here that let's wait and see, because it sounds like a lot of action is coming in on Michal right now, and so. But yeah, if he becomes a favorite and the line flips, I could totally see why you would bet Gamzatov, because it's a 50-50 fight, to be honest. The more I look at it, the more it appears to be a 50-50 fight for me. But my official pick is going to be Michal Oleksiejczuk by decision.
And without much confidence, I'm going to make it a split here, and I'm going to go with Gamzatov by decision. I think that if there's one thing that we've come away with, is that we don't think that this fight is going to finish in all likelihood. But I kind of like Gamzatov's size a little bit more in the spot. He's a little bit taller. He's a little bit longer. I think he might be able to get to the target a little bit easier as a result of that. And otherwise he's just a little bit patient. I think he can move a little bit, stick on the outside. Whereas Oleksiejczuk just kind of puts himself in range, almost lost the range kickboxing match he had with Modestas Bukauskas, who then, unfortunately, Modestas then suffered a very bad, grievous injury in his next bout, but, did not fare very well against kickboxer Khalil Roundtree. So just a cause for concern for me there, but not a matchup I have investment in. So we can move along to a matchup where I do have some investment. We've got Benoit Saint-Denis and Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. I call him Easy. And Easy dos Santos is, he's a favorite in this spot. He's taking on a UFC newcomer, which is surprising. He's been around for a long time, but, I liked a lot of what I saw from Benoit Saint-Denis on tape. I think he's a talented fighter. I think he's got some upside. I think there's fights he can win in the UFC, no doubt. I think that this is a really, really tough one for your first, shot out there. Sean Strickland, after some seasoning in the UFC, got head kicked in like a minute and a half or 2 minutes by this guy. So it's like we can all see that when he's on, he's very dangerous. Even in fights where he's losing, he got dropped on like the first punch against Li Jingliang and fought him tooth and nail till like the bitter end. And he ends up getting flatlined there. But it's like, guys, if you saw that fight, he took a lot of punishment. He never stopped coming forward. He never stopped landing shots. So I think that, the age gap and the undefeated record are what's keeping this line pretty close here. But I do think that this is, relatively speaking, a step down in competition. When you look at all the killers and murderers that Izzy Dos Santos has fought over the years. And so for that reason, I think he should be a little bit of a wider favorite here. I think that he's going to continue to balloon up in price as we get closer to the fight. I don't think he's going to get submitted in the spot unless he death gasses, which I don't expect. I think he's got very sound grappling. Most of the time when I've seen him taken down, it's on caught kicks because he's like a wild capoeira guy. It's not because somebody shoots in on his hips. And when he does get taken down, he's often right back to his feet. Most people don't want to engage in his guard. When people try to, he's often using an elevator butterfly. I've seen him kick people over as they try and double leg him right back to the feet. He's kind of spry. Unless he's compromised and regressed due to age, I think that Izzy Dos Santos is going to look like a clear side after Saturday night against a UFC newcomer. And again, I don't like betting on somebody in their debut with the organization. This isn't even a guy who came through Contender Series, as best I understand. So it's, coming right from the French regional scene. Now, granted, he got some wins in Brave as well. So it's not like he's just been fighting bums, but I do think he's taking a massive step up in competition here. And Izzy Dos Santos is not a slouch on the ground. He's not a slouch on the feet. I think he's going to have him covered everywhere. And I expect him to win the fight, probably inside the distance. So I'm going to be on Izzy Dos Santos money line at -215 for a pretty substantial investment. MMA lock of the night. I kick it to you, my friend. How do you feel about this one?
When we're talking about regional promotions and guys that we kind of try to give them some credit in terms of what are the type of work they did on the regional scene, you got to kind of put Brave up there, it's one of the better promotions to be fighting with. So to go 8-0, I believe you went 4-0 inside that promotion. Got to give him some credit, but given his fighting style, it just seems like he's, rush forward, try to grab the takedown, try to submit his guys. I think he has 7 submission wins, 1 knockout win in his 8 fights. But it seems like he's more of a submission over position kind of guy, right? There's so many times where he's just going for a submission and he just loses position, doesn't get the submission either, and then his opponent ends on top. But luckily for him, goes out there and still finishes opponents. But this is a steep level of competition for him, or a steep challenge for him in terms of level of competition that he's going to be taking here with Zaleski. Now, Zaleski has been submitted twice in his career, but it was way early in his career, like 8 years ago we're talking. So he's definitely making a ton of improvements since then. And now he uses takedowns, which is hilarious to see a capoeira guy do. But, he's really rounding out his game as best as possible. And I don't know about you guys, but I thought he won that last fight against Muslim Salikov. Like, I don't know how you could have scored. Like, that first round, in my opinion, was pretty much even up until the point that Zaleski drops him. And that's the most significant part of that round. How do you not score that round for him? And it seems like 2 judges actually scored against him in that spot. But the next 2 rounds were a little bit closer. Regardless, should have won that fight. Completely different stylistic matchup here. What I'm actually looking for is the violence bet. I like me some violence, as you guys can already tell. And I feel as though with the style of Benoit to go out there, or Benoit to go out there, exactly, grateful dude, on the money right there. This guy's never been to a decision in his career. And the way that he fights is super aggressive, right? He leaves himself open at times. And I think that Zaleski will be able to take advantage of that. So no real props available at this moment. I just refreshed it. And we got Dos Santos inside the distance is sitting at +125. So we'll see what the rest of the props drop at, what the total drops at as well. Me thinks it's going to drop at 1.5, especially considering the track record that this Benoit guy has coming into the UFC. But I like Zaleski, man. I think he finds that chin at a certain point and puts him out. So I'll keep an eye on the under 2.5. If it's at a decent line, I'll probably take a shot. But in terms of a prediction, I'm going to go Zaleski, and I think he flatlines this kid.
Well, the other thing I will just add is, you did mention 8-0. He has the 1 no contest, and I did go back and watch that fight, and he wasn't faring well at the end of that second round. Granted, it's like we don't get to see the conclusion, and as fight fans, we want that conflict resolution. So very disappointing, but he's got blood all over his face, blood in his eyes, can't see. He's underneath. He's getting dropped elbows on by somebody that he's probably got a skill gap over. So it's like, we're seeing even against people that he's better than, that he's shown I can out-grapple, he's making positional mistakes. He's getting overzealous. He's green. He's a little young. That's the only thing. I think it's a lot of things that scared me on the tape for a talented guy, for a guy who's got a lot of potential, just making a lot of mistakes still, in my opinion. Shawn, how do you feel about this one? You're muted, my friend.
This is the one fight I didn't get to tape, but I do think you just need to be cognizant of what you said, Liam, which is UFC debut and also step down in competition. I think the odds, just with that in my brain, without having watched the tape, would probably lean me into betting Zaleski here, because the line isn't that wide, in my opinion, for a UFC debut. But yeah, I didn't really tape much, so I'm going to pass it on to Tajik.
Yes, and I'm gonna pass it on to Liam to cover our next fight, because I didn't tape this one either. But I'm gonna plug tape index at MMA365.com, because that's a must-have if you're if you're serious about betting and DraftKings. So go ahead and purchase that subscription. Don't be cheap. Because that's what I did, and I'm pretty sure everybody here in this in this tremendous pod did as well. So yeah, and so I'm gonna tape it. I haven't taped it yet, but Easy seems like a deserved favorite here, and maybe heavily underpriced at that. So I agree with Shawn. So let's go to the next one.
Awesome. So we can kick it right to the next fight here. And, guys, I got to be honest, I got investment on this one too. We got Albert Duraev taking on Roman Kopylov, and I'm going to have to own up. I've been doing damn well on Contender Series, hit a lot of big underdogs this season, but I swung on Caio Bittencourt and got mollywopped. And I was fading the 2 years off. I'm like, this guy Duraev, he got knocked out a couple times at welterweight. How good is he? Damn good. Caio Bittencourt, I went back and I'm talking myself into this bet. I'm watching gi jiu-jitsu matches from 9 years ago in grainy YouTube footage. And then I see him get walked over and I'm like, oh, he's about to hit the hip escape. And I see him visibly get injured on screen. And I'm like, oh God, it's all over. Like, number one, that tells me Duraev's got crazy strength, because he tried to just do normal body movements and got injured. And he was compromised the rest of the fight. Go back and watch that. You'll see it on his face at the time it happens. He goes to move and he's like, oh, his ribs start bothering him. And I think he talks about it after too. But either way, he had no answers. He was relentless with the ground and pound. And on top of that, his regional footage checks out. He's fought a tremendous level of competition. He's been fighting in, he's a 2-weight world champion. And you talked about Brave. Brave is like here, and then you got ACA and ACB here. So it's like, this is one of the best regional promotions in the world. And I do think that Duraev at minus 260, I think I played it at minus 260, was like a must play. Now it's minus 300. I think that's closer to accurate. But I took a pretty big investment in Duraev, and I parlayed him with Kayla Harrison tonight as well. So we'll see how that plays. But I think that hopefully I'll be going in with all the units on Duraev this weekend. I'm kidding, but pretty sizable investment by my standards, because he really proved something to me last time. And now I don't have to say, well, he's coming off this long layoff. How's he going to look? He's going to look tremendous. And Kopylov on the other end, I did watch his fights. He's not a bad fighter, but his first fight, he got, big manned by Carl Roberson, and Carl Roberson outfought him, was able to be a better mixed martial artist, mix up the game on him at the end. I really think a lot of it had to do with him deadening the calf, but Duraev has tremendous leg kicks as well. And Kopylov had zero answer for that. in the last fight. So I do think that, Kopylov, he could have made some improvements here. He's still the younger guy in this matchup, but if you're getting submitted by Karl Roberson, you're getting submitted by Albert Duraev. I can't be talked into another possibility. So Shawn, I'm just kidding, but how do you feel about this one, my friend?
Yeah. So Duraev, he's going to man bully Roman in this fight, in my opinion. I mean, I just think that Duraev's game is pretty well rounded. He actually has pretty solid wrestling that I've seen on tape. So even if the fight starts to get hairy, I think he can land takedowns too. I think Roman's game is pretty basic. I think he's being fed to the wolves. And like you said, if you get submitted by Karl Roberson, that's a massive, massive red flag for me. Now, I will say for the kicks, I do think they're standing opposite. So it's going to be Duraev landing inside kicks as opposed to where Roberson could really chew away at that calf. But that being said, I don't know. I think Duraev has a full steam ahead. I think that he's going to be way more powerful. He's way more proven. And I think he's going to win this inside the distance.
I am glad to hear that we line up on that one. Tajik, we're going to kick this one to you, my friend. How do you feel about this matchup?
I don't know why, but I'm almost like so far on every single underdog in this fight, which is not a typical self. I understand the hype around Drive. He fought in a tough league. ACA is a great promotion. And against beaten court he looked great as well. But at the same time, the way this line has gone is just pretty disturbing for me. And I really don't see. I really don't understand why would it be so live. From Kopolov's perspective, I think Karl Roberson's performance was actually pretty subpar. But at least I know what to expect out of him. At the UFC level. I don't know that against Duraev because he's making his debut. And then his career has been marred by prolonged absences, just like Kopilov's, right? And so I think technically I'm not gonna go into the breakdown here, but just to mention that in my opinion this line is way too wide. And to me, Duraev, I have to see Duraev at the UFC level and to see how he performs. I think it's going to be a close fight. I think Kopylov has a tendency to make fights close. I think Karl Roberson fights was also pretty close for him. And for a debut, it was not the most terrible debut. But yeah, and then yet again, I'm gonna pick Kopylov, and I'm an underdog in Kopylov, and I'm gonna pick him by decision.
All right, so we got a little bit of a different take there from my man Tajik, giving me a little bit of nerves, but no worries. We're going to hold steady and stick with our read. We got MMA Lock of the Night kicking us off with the last one. Duraev, how do you feel about him?
He's probably like one of my favorite spots on the card, to be honest, man. I think he absolutely bullies and decimates Kopylov in this spot. Now, I'll say this. I started off taping this fight by watching the Kopylov side first. And, I watched his earlier fights and I'm like, oh, this, the kid has good striking. He has good confidence in it. But like, you got to question the level of competition that he was going up against. Some of those guys just didn't even seem like they wanted to be in the cage to begin with. And then you even see they have odds on his Colby Ortiz fight. He was like a -800 favorite going into that fight. So you already knew that was going to be a squash match. But again, I didn't know that. Like when I was doing the research, I found that out afterwards. But I was impressed with his last two fights in Fight Nights Global before coming over to the UFC. Did a good job in terms of stopping some takedowns, doing good work from the outside. But it seems like those opponents were almost fine with just playing that distance game with him. And you can't be doing that against a kid like that who has that type of striking. Then he comes into the UFC and he's just low output, letting Roberson do his thing from the outside and then eventually getting that submission at the end of the fight. So like, if you just wiki cap this fight and you see that Karl Roberson has a submission victory over this guy, you're like, oh, auto bet Duraev. But like, that's negligent on our part as cappers and analysts and guys that are actually giving information to people to be like, oh, I didn't even bother looking into this fight. I saw Karl Roberson beat him. I'm automatically betting Derive. But after you run the tape, man, it's hard to not pick Derive in this spot. I think he will be able to secure takedowns. Probably the best wrestler that Kopylov has faced to this point. And then from that top position, man, Derive just goes to absolute work. Like you said, two-time champ or two-weight champion over there at ACA. And we're talking about, like you said, Liam, in terms of having ACA above Brave. I think ACA is the top of the top in terms of regional promotions to have guys who are successful over there and come over to the UFC and do work. I think Derive is one of the best guys that has come over from ACA. I know he has a couple knockout losses on his record, but that was how long ago? And I think the last guy to knock him out was Anatoly Tokov, who never made it to the UFC, but is a pretty damn good Bellator fighter himself, has a great record himself. And he was a big dude in that fight as well. I believe it was a ground and pound finish. He just absolutely torched him on the ground with those shots. I just don't see Roman having that type of chance there. If you are bracking Roman, this is my honest opinion, the best way to take him would be KO, because I think I don't see him winning minutes here. You know what I mean? I think Derive is going to be pushing the pace pretty much the entire time, pushing him up against cage, dragging this fight to the ground, and then going to absolute work there. And I think it's going to take a Hail Mary KO plus 700 KO from Kopylov if you think he's going to win this fight. Otherwise, I got Derive inside the distance. And yeah, Liam, I might be overly invested in him this weekend as well, but I think justifiably so, man. The guy's a legitimate talent.
Really quick,
I love it.
Really quick, yeah. I'll add a note. So I have some analytics actually on the regional scene, all the regional promotions and how they actually fare in the UFC. And ACA, ACB, they're at like a 70% win clip. They are far above everybody. Most promotions are usually around the 50s, 40s. So you really have to take stock in that. Like the level of competition over there and what it takes to win is quite high.
What's top three? What are the top three promotions, Shawn, if you have that available to you?
I'd have to pull it up in front of me, but I'll tell you two things that really stood out to me is Titan FC is a massive fade. And CFFC is actually a lot better than you think. So those East Coast boys are actually doing quite well. And this is the cumulative stats of how they've performed. And the way I set up the data was they had to have fought at least twice in that regional promotion to qualify. So yeah, I would definitely start to get some Titan guys if you can, and then give a little more credence to CFFC.
I love it. I love it. And I love especially when somebody's going to shout out them East Coast fighters grinding out here for the CFFC. The only other thing I'll mention is just to bolster Shawn's point. You know, sometimes I have this bad habit as a grappler myself of getting sucked into a wormhole on YouTube where I'm watching Duraev grappling matches now, as well as his MMA fights. And guys, he's very sound as a wrestler as well. He's not going to give up easy takedowns, and he's pretty dang good at pursuing them himself, even against high-level defensive wrestlers. Was able to beat some other high-level Russian prospect MMA fighters in grappling matches during his absences. So that's the other thing. It's not like the guy's been on the couch. He has been doing some other grappling and competitive combat events, just not been fighting. So now he's back at it, and I think he's going to get to work in his UFC debut. Locke, you got something?
Yeah, I just found it hilarious. Like right after his Dana White Contender Series fight, like he just marches over to Dana and be like, "Dana, give me Israel, give me Whitaker, give me this guy. I smashed them all." Like he got that. He has that Chimaev swag about him too, man. I fucking love it. And even the next day he's in the gym at Extreme Couture with Eric Nixick and those guys, just getting ready for his next fight. And if I'm not mistaken, a couple of days after that, he had that DiCarico fight announced, which is obviously now Kopylov. So we know what we're getting here. Possible Chimaev duplicate here. And it makes absolute sense, right? Duraev, Chimaev, fuck, but these guys are from the same part of the world. Like, yeah, I like Duraev in this spot. I'd be surprised if he goes out there and loses this fight this weekend.
Yeah, Liam, and I also want to say something real quick. You know, when I do my like a tape studies, what I tend to do is to actually fade and not put much weight into the last fights. that the fighters have had. Unfortunately, or it elevates the sense of excitement. And when you look at Duraev, is like, I mean, come on, like you look at his overall, like that last fight is so impressive, right? But his overall record so is as well. But what that equally is important, I think, when you look at the Kopylov, right? That if I subtract this last fight, out of Duraev, I'm gonna do that, out of Kopylov as well. And so, and I look into the big picture, and when I look into the big picture, it becomes a closer fight for me. So when you look into the Kopylov, I know 3 of you guys are going into like Duraev, and I'm pretty sure, maybe 97% of MMA community going that way. All I'm saying is that, if he puts up a good fight, in the beginning, maybe first round, I think, rounds 2 to 3 is going to be pretty close, and hence my pick by decision. So that's where I'm coming from. I tend to just subtract this last fights on both sides, and it just helps me with the big.
I'll echo what you're saying. I think that the value side is on your side. I think the line is really blown out. And if you're looking at the betting market as a traditional market, you have to play where the value is. So I do think you're on the value side. But I don't hate chasing juice if you're feeling passionate about it. So and I do think that Duraev is going to win the fight, but I 100% agree with what you're saying.
And guys, the only thing absolutely. No,
sorry, last thing. We kind of talked about it a little bit earlier on the podcast as well, in terms of kind of not putting too much stock into the UFC debut of guys, right? Like you could also see a little bit of jitters or ring rust, whatever the fuck it might be. That's something that we obviously have to keep in mind here. One that always comes to mind for me is Tyler Santos, right? Falls flat against Mauro Romero Barella. Everybody fades her the next time around against Molly McCann. And then we see what happens in that fight, right? So, yeah, there is obviously substance to what Tajik is saying, and we might see a completely different Kopylov. Maybe we see what he used to look like on the regional scene, beating up bums. But unfortunately for him, Duraev is no bum.
Right there with you. And the only other thing I'll add is, at this point, I would tend to start, maybe agreeing with you guys. I'm seeing plus 270 is available on Roman Kopylov now on 5 dimes. So now the line has actually exceeded where I even played it myself, which was minus 260 on the Duraev side. So I just think that at the line I got it, I like it a lot. At minus 300, I don't know that there's as much value there. I think that the value's been sucked out of the market, and most places are holding a number higher than that. So that's why this is a numbers game. We're trying to establish where is it a value bet, and I do think I like where I got my number, but you got to feel comfortable with the number you get. And laying minus 350 or whatever, now I have to have a real degree of confidence that maybe I can't get just because the guy's never debuted in the UFC before. Fair enough. So we can move right along to the next fight, guys, which is Zybera Tukhugov and Ricardo Ramos. And I cashed Ramos, I believe, as a dog his last fight out. So salute to Ramos for coming through for the kid. Appreciate that guy. And we got Leonardo in the chat, says Lock in the house. Shout out Leonardo. Shout out my man Lock. And this is a fight that's interesting to me. I think, again, we should have good fun here. I think a lot of people are expecting Tukhugov to get a knockout in the first round. We've seen Ramos get flatlined before. But I think outside of that, this becomes a much more interesting fight and probably a little bit closer than the odds would entail. So, in fact, we'll kick it to Lock first. How do you feel about this fight, my friend?
Pre-tape, I really thought I was going to be on the Ramos side, but after seeing, he is a little bit hittable at times when he gets into the pocket and exchanges, like you're saying, Tukhugov is absolutely live for a knockout in the spot. But if he doesn't get the knockout here, then things get extended. Tukhugov is really not that hot in the third round, right? I put out a statistic earlier today in regards to Tukhugov in his third round. So he's been to 5 decisions in his UFC career. 4 of them have been split decisions, which he's 1, 2, and 1 in. And then out of those 5 decisions, he's dropped the third round on at least one scorecard in every single one of those fights. It doesn't look good, especially with his cardio and how much he seems to slow down at times. But that's where it gets a little bit tricky for me, because I do believe this fight could go as Tukhugov wins the first 2 rounds just off of pace, moving forward, landing a couple of takedowns, obviously, but he needs to be obviously very sharp on the ground here, as Ramos is a pretty damn good black belt himself. So that's something he needs to worry about. The way that I was approaching it, a couple of the props that I threw out there was obviously Tukhugov by decision plus 150, Tukhugov round 1 plus 800. I think that line's a little bit off, especially considering how much power he has in his hands, and we've obviously seen it on full display in past fights, or Ramos round 3 plus 2000, which I think is a little bit crazy, considering that there are times where Tukhugov he gets into desperation takedown more in those third rounds, and you don't want to be doing that against a high-level black belt like Hamosh. If Hamosh has, even a little bit more energy in the tank than what Tuhugov brings to the table there, he could snatch up a neck, he could grab the back, he could possibly control him for that third round, possibly lock up a submission of his own or something, and that's what's ultimately keeping me off of the money line on either side here. The pick is Tuhugov by decision, but I might just sprinkle the round 1 Tuhugov and round 3 Hamosh and just call it a day. I just can't trust Tuhugov. He's not on the level of the rest of these Russians, in my opinion, hence why we're only getting minus 160 on him compared to the other chalk that we're getting on the other guys. But this is a tough test, man. It's funny because it went from Hikaru Hamosh being almost overrated earlier in his UFC career to now him being underrated, right? Like nobody gave him a shot in that Bill Algeo fight, or at least nobody from who I saw was capping that fight. But yeah, I got Tuhugov decision. Like I said, round 1 plus 800 Tuhugov, or round 3 plus 2,000 Hamosh. That's where my money will be.
Fair enough. And I am a man that loves looking for props. So all respect to you there, Locke. Haven't dug deep in the prop market for this fight myself, but we're going to kick it over to Shawn. How do you feel about this one? And is there value in your opinion?
Yeah, so I think there's definitely value on Hamosh. I've faded Tuhugov a couple times. I don't think Tuhugov is good, personally. I think he has absolutely terrible control wrestling. I think he has a terrible gas tank. He's very low volume. The optics in which he fights are very poor. He likes to retreat. He does this kind of little shuffle stance and shakes out his arms after exchanges. I actually thought that you could argue that Dawodu beat him 30-27, personally. I have absolutely no clue why that was a split decision. I had pretty heavy action on Dawodu.
Stop running!
Yeah, he got mean. So I bet Hamosh. I put 1.5 units on his money line. I think it was plus 150 or something like that. I don't think a submission is outside of the question here because Tuhugov is going to gas out. And I just flat out don't believe in his heart, his cardio, his skill set, his overall game seems confusing to me. And this is going to be a much larger cage where I think that Hamosh is going to have a lot more square footage to work his striking game. I think if you're looking at volume, there's no scenario here where I don't see Hamosh just hitting him with points throughout the minutes, which is always a favorable side to be on if you're betting someone as an underdog. So I think Hamosh is, personally for me, is probably one of the best value sides on this card. But I'll see what Tajik has to say to crush my dreams.
All right, Tajik, start crushing.
This is going to be the spot he picks the favorite. I'm telling you, Shawn.
Yeah. So about Tuhugov, right? So I agree with a lot of what Shawn actually has said. I thought Tuhugov's cardio is terrible. His grappling control is also abysmal. But one thing that I kind of know from watching his tapes, regionally when he gives his interview, in Russian, he spoke about not being actually 100% committed to training. And I'm gonna go, a little bit, Sun Tzu style off of the narrative here. But it was very obvious that the level of commitment of Zubeira wasn't there. He's a very, flamboyant. He's ever present on the social media and Instagram and elsewhere. And so I think right now what we're going to see here is very different to Tuhugov, and we're gonna get to see Tuhugov that can actually control Hamosh, and Hamosh, he breaks under pressure, and I think that's what you need. You need to grind him, try to take him down, pound him out a little bit, and then when you do that somewhere around, in the later stages of the second round, third round, he breaks. So I think UFC knows here what they're doing. They're giving him a winnable fight. They know that Hamosh is mentally weak, and I think it's a good bounce back fight for Tuhugov. So if on Saturday you see Tukhugov, getting takedowns, just pounding out and mauling, and you're like, what happened to this Tukhugov? It's probably that his level of commitment has changed, and he's now a different man. And then you're gonna be like, yeah, it's crazy, but it might not happen, right? Maybe it's just a narrative that I'm going off of, and it's not, and it doesn't have any validity, or how Luke likes to say, credence to it. So we'll see how it goes. I like where the line is going right now. I'm gonna be interested in Tukhugov. I'm actually gonna take it a little bit further. I'm gonna go and say that Tukhugov stops Khamosh by TKO.
Not gonna happen.
Okay, but remember, Shawn, every time we do the Liam spot, the conversation we have are not being recorded, and they're not available on YouTube or elsewhere. So there, I said it, and there are not going to be any consequences for me picking Tukhugov by TKO.
Rock and roll, Tajik. You got to stick with your guns. That being said, I think that if I do end up taking action here, I will probably be on the Hamos side for a lot of the reasons Shawn mentioned. I don't want to belabor that point, but I'll just say I think he has potential to score more points over minutes and probably not gas out. I think that his grappling defense should be sufficient to prevent Tukhugov from wrestling him here, and I think that he might have sneaky upside to peek out on the back and things like that. I think Hamos has a pretty decent, slick submission game of his own when he chooses to employ it. So I think Hamos has some upside here as a big plus money underdog. But, the line where it is, it's not going to be a huge play for me, maybe a unit, maybe a little less, but I think that I'll consider a play on Hamos. If the line continues to balloon into Tuhugov's favor, perhaps I'll take a larger investment. But right now, I'm looking at a small poke on Hamos, potentially on the money line. But
really quick,
yes, absolutely.
Bill Algeo is a little bit better than he's getting credit for. I think Lamas would smash Tukhugov if I had to pick. And Bill gave a very good account of himself in that fight. So I'm looking at that win for Hamos as a pretty high mark, in my opinion. And I hope you lose, Tajik. I hope you lose this week.
We've got dissension among the ranks.
I need you to lose. I need it.
That would be hilarious. We'll be DMing each other on Twitter on Saturday. I feel like
I'm in your DMs when the fight's happening for sure.
Let's go.
I love it. We've got next up a fight that, people are vocal on both sides of this matchup as well. Can't say I'm as passionate about this one. Still thinking it over. I feel like it could kind of go either way, but man, it's a little tricky to me on paper. You got Amanda Ribas and Virna Jandiroba. I think that on the feet, this should favor Ribas, pretty clearly and substantially. With the exception of her poor chin, Amanda Ribas just has much better striking metrics. She throws more. She's got more effective volume. That being said, I do have that one little lurking concern. I had a decent sized investment on her against Marina Rodriguez. Everything's going according to plan. I do think Rodriguez has more power than Virna, obviously. She's a natural striker. Verna's a natural grappler. But I do think that Verna's also got that grappling path, and I think that Amanda hasn't had a lot of opportunities to show off her takedown defense. Mackenzie Dern, while a plus level grappler, has proven herself to be a minus level wrestler, to the detriment of my wallet. And that's just a reality. So I don't know how to evaluate Ribas's takedown defense. And I do know that Virna is very dangerous on the ground. I don't think Amanda's just going to get outclassed completely, but I do think that Virna is probably going to be the more dominant physical force if she's on top. So, man, this fight is a little tricky to me. I've seen opinions I really respect, like wildly on both sides. So I'm interested to hear how my panel shakes out. We're going to start off with my man Tajik and give him a chance to get back on the attack. Tajik, who do you got in this one?
Yeah, I'm gonna be short. I think Ribas's takedown defense, just her judo credentials are sufficient to keep it standing, and she's gonna go ahead and piece up Virna Jandiroba, standing. Virna is actually one of my favorite fighters in the UFC. She's a great character, great personality. You know, I cheer for her a lot. But I just think that it's gonna be a good bounce back fight for Ribas, and she's gonna take this one by decision.
Awesome. Fair enough. Short, sweet, and to the point. Shawn, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, so I took some really early action on Virna, and after taping it, I'm not 100% sold that she can get it done. But that being said, I do think if you got Virna where I did, which was plus 160, I believe, I think it's probably the spot. Ribas, so here are the two concerns I have just with this fight. So for one, if you're getting bullied in the striking department against Mackenzie Dern, that's a really terrible sign. And Virna got bullied. So that gives me some pause. Now, for the Ribas side, she did get taken down by Randa Marcos. So she was able to kick her way up top, but I don't think Virna is I don't think Marcos is anywhere on the level of Virna. So I do think if Virna scores a couple takedowns here, she can eke out a decision. I'm a little undecided on what I want to do with my action. Anybody who like talks with me privately knows I'm frequently arbing off of lines to get profit. So that's kind of how I roll. So I'm still deciding whether or not I want to take a little bit of profit on it and just sit tight on this fight. It's a confusing fight, to say the least. I think if you look at level of camps, it muddies it even more. I mean, Virna is at a camp that's so-so, in my opinion. And then you've got Ribas at American Top Team, I believe, still. So you just got to think about quality of sparring partners preparing you for this fight. So, yeah, as of now, I am probably 75% sure I'm going to arb off of it and just take profit. But if you got that 160 line, 155 line, I think it's worth maybe sitting if you feel passionate about it.
Awesome. Fair enough. And Locke, close us out. How do you feel about this one, my friend?
I feel pretty passionate about the Virna Jandiroba side in this spot. My claim to fame of 2021 was calling Marina Rodriguez to knock out Amanda Ribas and cashing that KO prop at plus 1300. But it started with the fact that I think that Amanda Ribas is somewhat fraudulent in her striking game. Like, it looks pretty on the surface, but I feel it's more show than actual substance. I don't think that she actually has anything in her striking that's going to keep an opponent, too scared to stay on the outside, unless, it's Paige Van Zandt or Hannah Marcos or something like that. Sure. But or
Mackenzie Dern, who she did bust up with the boxing.
Exactly. And Mackenzie Dern in that fight went 0 of 6 on takedowns. So that's another spot where you have to, kind of take statistics with a grain of salt, especially when you talk about Amanda Ribas, who has an 85% takedown defense. But like Shawn was talking about, on the first attempt, Randa Marcos shot, she landed a takedown. She got the fight to the ground, but that's not where she wanted to be, right? Ribas was probably the much better jiu-jitsu player there, and Randa Marcos probably just didn't feel as comfortable there. In terms of Virna Jandiroba, now, when I'm arguing this fight, everybody always brings up the Mackenzie Dern fight. How can you bet Virna's, based on that Mackenzie Dern fight and what you're going to be getting here with Amanda Ribas? She did something very uncharacteristic in that fight. When you watch Virna Jandiroba's fight, she's normally a grappler, right? She wants to go out there, take you to the ground and try to submit you, grapple fuck you, whatever the hell it is. She only shot one takedown in that fight, and she spent 40 seconds on top of Mackenzie Dern at the ending of that second round. There were other opportunities for her to be on top of Mackenzie Dern, but she chose to allow Mackenzie Dern to get back to her feet, thinking that she'll be able to probably outstrike her. But again, say what you want about Dern. She was doing enough work with Jason Perlo to continue to stick and move against a subpar striker in Virna Jandiroba. In this fight, though, I think that we'll see her kind of push forward. I think we'll see her kind of wade through the striking of Ribas, grab that body lock and drag this fight to the ground, where I think she's going to have an advantage on the ground. I truly think that Virna was a little bit skeptical in regards to her jiu-jitsu up against Mackenzie Dern's, hence why she didn't go for takedowns in that fight. There are a couple of the fights where you don't see Jandiroba shooting more than one takedown. One of them was the Kanako Murata fight, which was the last one, right? She was more than likely not going to be the better wrestler in that fight. Knowing the fight was probably going to end up on the ground, she still ended up doing some damage to the arm of Murata, and then obviously getting that fight stopped by injury. I think it was. I had the over 2.5 in that fight at -170. I was super pissed that I ended up losing like that because I thought Murata would just be able to control it from on top and not get submitted or anything like that. So no takedowns in that fight from Virna. The Mackenzie Dern fight, again, I think that she thought she would be out jiu-jitsu'd if she got this fight on the ground, hence why she didn't pursue the takedowns as much as she normally does. And then the only other fight in the UFC where she's only gone for one takedown was the Felice Herrig fight, where she only needed one takedown to wrap up that submission. But you see her consistently in other fights going for takedowns time and time again, and I expect her to do the same thing here against Amanda Ribas. Again, I'd be surprised if she tries to take the Mackenzie Dern approach and just try to stay at range and try to pick her apart from the outside. That's not her game. Go back to your bread and butter, Virna. And I think that she's going to be able to do that successfully here against Ribas. I know Ribas is a decent black belt herself, but I'm not 100% sure Virna will actually get her out of there. I was looking at Virna by decision, which is currently sitting at +275, but even at +145, I don't mind that shot here, man. I think that she'll be able to drag this fight to the ground, get that control time, and take this one home. I'm seeing some steam coming in on Ribas, so it's only Wednesday of fight week, so I'm going to sit back, wait it out, see if there's more money that comes in on Ribas, and then try to take a shot on Virna earlier. So yeah, shout out to Shawn in terms of getting on this action earlier at that +160. That's a very sharp spot in my opinion. But in my opinion, I'm just going to sit back. I'm going to wait. I'm fine with taking the shot at +145 because I feel quite convicted, but I feel like we might get a better line here. So I'm just going to sit back and wait. But yeah, I think Virna just wrecks her on the ground. Again, not sure if she'll get the submission, but I think she'll get a ton of control time, and the fraudulent Ribas will continue to show herself.
Dang nabbit. There goes Locke with the strong take. Boys, does anybody have strong conviction that they want to add on this matchup before we move along on the main card?
Yeah, I'm just going to say that you, Locke, just upset the 1.2 million Instagram followers that Ribas has.
She looks good in a bikini, but that's about it.
Which, by the way, is probably influencing this line. Just letting everybody know that.
A very sharp take all the way out from my man, Shawn. Always something to consider is the notoriety of the fighter that will influence how much betting action comes their way. Not everybody is somebody like us that comes back each and every week and is a glutton for this UFC punishment. Some people have other things going on and they only come around for these pay-per-view events. We got to take advantage when they do and look for those soft lines influenced by casual bettors. And this may be one of them. Good shout there from Shawn. Tajik, did you have anything you wanted to add on this matchup before we move right along? Nothing? Boom. On to Magomed Ankalaev and Volkan Ozdemir. This is going to be a step-up fight for Magomed Ankalaev. Nikita Krylov gave him his toughest test in the UFC besides Paul Craig's last 10 seconds. Which that was just hysterical, honestly. It's one of the, cage fighting is just an inherently funny sport at times. And that was one of the funniest moments in UFC history where he's well on its way to a 30-24. And if he holds his breath for a beat, it's all over. And he's like, I got to get out of here. Man, it was just a little bit alarming to me there. Now we see he's a massive favorite in this spot. But I could kind of get why, Volkan, man, he's kind of been eating a lot of punches in his UFC run, in my opinion. Obviously got some quick knockouts early on, but I feel like he's been taking a lot of shots clean in these fights, especially that last time out against Yuri. And that was one of the most brutal knockouts I have seen in a long time in the UFC as well, where he just gets off switched badly. And, he's dished those out. He off switched, Ilir Latifi in a really horrific way. But man, he got dealt back the favor by Yuri. So I think that, while I understand the value on Volkan here, potentially I am probably going to end up passing on this fight I do think Ankalaev is a destroyer of worlds, but I think he's a little bit hittable on the feet. So I think if the takedown game isn't working, the fight gets interesting. The number looks silly, but I do think he's probably going to be able to get Volkan to the ground here. And I think that once he's on the ground, he's a problem with the ground and pound. He's also a problem, I think, if he's going to try and pass and look for submissions here. Volkan looked like he was unenthused at a certain point in the Cormier fight. And I think that is because he was forced to grapple. And when he's striking, he's got a lot of purpose, a lot of promise. But I do think that when he's forced to grapple for extended periods, it will make him look a lot worse. So we'll have to wait and see. Volkan's shown some pretty decent cage wrestling defense, I will add. But I do think that Ankalaev's probably got the strength and athleticism to get him down here. So, Locke, I'm going to kick it to you, my friend. How do you feel about this matchup? Are you targeting anything here? And what do you like?
I love that you said destroyer of worlds, Magomed Ankalaev, because that's what exactly I believe of this guy. I think he is the uncrowned 205 champion. I think he is going to eventually be champion. If it wasn't for that one miss there if it wasn't for that one Paul Craig gaff that he had. Again, I remember watching that fight back. It was literally 13 seconds left when Paul Craig threw up that triangle, and it took him all 13 seconds all to throw it up, lock it up, and then obviously have the success that he did. So obviously very unfortunate spot from there. But if it wasn't for that, I think he probably already would have had a title shot. He probably already would have been champion. His issue always has been, and this is kind of what I always hear from people that look to fade him, is the volume, right? Sometimes he's just a little bit too patient. He waits for his opportunities to either counter or get his strikes off, and that could potentially put him behind on the judges' scorecards, especially if he has a fighter in front of him that's going to be throwing out the volume. I just think that he's just too crisp on the feet here, especially for a guy like Volkan, where I think he's going to be able to counter effectively, land a big shot, probably ground him. And I think the most of his success will probably come on the ground if he is able to get this fight to the ground and, dominate as he normally did, just as he did with Nikita Krylov as well. I'm throwing a conspiracy tinfoil hat type of thing out there now. Plus 2,600 on him to win by submission, considering the amount of success I expect for him to have on the ground here. We're a little bit of a sprinkle. I know he has 0 submission wins on his record, but it's almost like one of the Miguel Baeza thing where he submitted the Japanese kid. I can't remember his name, but never had a submission victory on his record. And it was like plus 1,600 or something for him to win by submission. And lo and behold, it happens. I know Baez is a black belt and is a pretty good jiu-jitsu player, but when you don't have it on the record, you see that skewed prop, which I think is skewed here as well for Ankalaev. I expect it, with Volkan Usman, we're talking about a guy who, lost via neck crank or whatever the fuck it was. I'm trying to remember what it was. It's like the bully move that he got submitted by over there in Bellator. Obviously, that was a long time ago. He must have made some improvements, but with the amount of success I expect Ankalaev to have on the ground here, the slight possibility of a submission going off at plus 2,600, I'm down. So, I'm on the Ankalaev side. I'm not paying the money line, minus 330. It could get iffy, like you were saying, Liam. If he's not able to get the takedowns, things could get a little bit close. But this guy's always going to find a way to win, in my opinion. But I'm going to limit myself in terms of the exposure. So I'll have him in a couple of Hail Mary parlays and all that type of stuff, because I could see him either winning by decision or by finishing this guy. But yeah, I like Ankalaev here. Just a matter of time before this guy's champ. I think by the end of 2022, he's going to hold a 205-pound champ or title.
I love it with thank you, buddy. I love it with conviction as well. And what I'm just going to share here live with the viewers is that I'm going to be taking a small share of Magomed Ankalaev to win by submission at plus 2,600. And if you needed another reason besides Locke saying that he thinks it's live, Bet Online, which is one of the sharpest books in the space, has plus 1,000 as their current prop on Ankalaev by submission. FanDuel has plus 2,400. Need I say more? Shawn, I kick it to you, my friend. How do you feel about this one?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to be slightly contrarian here. So I do think the betting value is definitely on Volkan. I do think that Ankalaev, he has been dubbed the uncrowned king of the division by you, Locke, but also by a lot of people. And I do love what I see with Ankalaev. However, I am noticing that in a lot of his fights, he's relying very heavily on landing check hooks on people. if Volkan has done any modicum of tape research on Ankalaev, he should have a very fair chance at being able to crash the pocket and employ his game. Now, forward pressure, volume, things like that are definitely in Volkan's favor. And I actually am going to go on the flip side a little bit and say that I think that him securing takedowns is actually not outside of the question here. I think that if he pushes Ankalaev against the cage and puts him on his back foot, I think that there is a lot of opportunity here for him to steal minutes within the fight. There are obviously some concerns with Volkan being deaded by Jiri. However, Jiri is definitely the uncrowned king of the division. I mean, the man is an absolute freak of nature. So I don't really hold that against Volkan. And he did pretty well, actually, with Jiri's strange movement style, whereas Ankalaev is a little more traditional. So I think if he looks out for that left hook and he finds his moments where he pushes forward, I think he can secure minutes. And I think that ultimately Volkan is going to be the upset with the decision here.
Boom. Dropping the hammer. Shawn likes Volkan by decision. Interesting look. I think most people, if they're on Volkan this weekend, will be playing that Volkan KO, trying to, grab all the little extra juice for the squeeze. But man, interesting take. Tajik, do you feel the same way? Do you feel a little different? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I feel the same way. I don't understand, people's obsession with Ankalaev. To be honest with you, where is he better than Ozdemir? Ozdemir has a serviceable takedown defense and standing up, like Shawn has mentioned. I think they're pretty equal. With Jiri, it's a little bit kind of, it's tough to say that to make a lot out of it. I mean, the amount of juice that Jiri is on, he knocks out everybody, and I think he will probably be knocking out everybody in the foreseeable future. So when I look into the, he's like Rausch level juiced, like right? I mean, my goodness, like
don't be salty. Don't be salty.
No. Yeah, no, but here's the thing, right? I mean, go and watch that fight, Rausch versus Loic Rajabov. I mean,
it's absurd.
Rausch looked like Vitor Belfort in the old TRT days. My world. I mean, this guy was jacked. The thing about we're not going to talk about the PFL right now, but I mean, obviously the doping control is not on top of their agenda. So here it is. I think it's a pretty close fight. I actually think that Ozdemir has a good shot. And even if Ankalaev takes him down, I think he's not going to be able to hold him down for a prolonged period of time. And standing up, I think, I really like what I've seen from Ozdemir throughout his career. So he's going to offer him very competitive fight. I like Ozdemir by decision. This is 10th fight and my 11th underdog, but this is the one that I actually feel okay about, kind of like picking up. So I feel like he's okay. Yeah, there it is.
Awesome. So we've got a little bit of dissension again on the panel here, where me and Locke are thinking Ankalaev's probably going to win this fight. But we've also got two very smart guys thinking that Volkan is very live in the spot. I certainly think that he's live at the number, but ultimately I am going to side with Ankalaev. We will have to wait and see how this one shakes out, but should be good fun. And as my man Tajik just mentioned, 10 fights down, 5 to go. When do you ever hear that on the UFC? We will be racing through these main card matchups, but boy, we are in for an effing treat from start to finish here, guys. Gamzatov Chimaev and the Leech, Li Jingliang. What a freaking tremendous fight. I'm really excited about this one. Chimaev is back. The Leech, one of my favorite, like, low-key guys. I feel like us hardcores are blessed with the Leech. The casuals come around. They don't always get to see it, but the Leech has been raking eyes. He's been yelling in people's faces. He's been doing all sorts of fun things for years. And I always am expecting some kind of fireworks when the Leech is on my television screen. I think, unfortunately, this time the Leech is probably going to be getting exploded on. I do think Gamzatov Chimaev is the real deal. I do think he's a very skilled fighter. I'm not going to be backing him on the money line. It's minus 500. Where would your edge be? It's pretty tough in that spot, especially when he's taking a big step up in competition here against the Leech. But where has the Leech struggled? You know, Jake Matthews, again, he was resorting to eye pokes because he had no idea what else to do to get up. You know, he was also getting hurt on the feet in that matchup as well. So, granted, you know, the Leech grown into his 170-pound frame, does a good job feinting and moving. I'm impressed by some of the striking developments he's made. He's added a pretty good check hook. That uppercut finish against Easy Dos Santos was a thing of beauty because he made it basically, he had him reacting to the overhand over and over. So then when he went to feint the overhand, he came with the uppercut and finally timed Easy, who had been, you know, tough as nails to track down that fight. So the Leech, when you give him a striking fight, is very dangerous. I think that Gamzat is huge for this division. I think that he's going to be much bigger than the Leech, who's a former lightweight. This is a guy who competes up at middleweight as well, and doesn't look out of place. You know, everybody else seems to hate Gerald Meerschaert or think that he's bad at fighting. And I sit over here and look for my opportunities to bet on him. And, you know, I did against Chimaev. Man, that just shocked me. You know, I thought that Chimaev, you know, one punching him was a real surprise. That being said, not the greatest chin on Gerald, but for Christ's sakes, Chimaev can punch out 185ers with one punch. Muradov, everybody wanted to tell me how he's the next gift from God, and he's this striking wizard, and he got outstruck, plain and simple. No other two ways about it, by GM3. So I think that, you know, when all is said and done, Gamzat Chimaev's win over GM3 is aging quite nicely. The John Howard win, what I mean, obviously, or John Phillips, excuse me, John Howard. Now I'm bouncing back. But either way, I think that Gamzat, he's fought a limited level of competition, but everything I hear from people that train with him is that he dominates UFC fighters in the room every day. I believe that. So I'm with Gamzat Chimaev to win this fight. Not taking action on it from a money line perspective. DGen parlays from way back before the line was this wide, I think have Chimaev, but that's it. I think this should be good fun. I'll be sitting back watching. If the Leech is yelling China power over Gamzat's dead body, it's going to be the craziest pay-per-view of all time. So I'm fired up for it one way or the other, but I think it should be good fun. And I think Chimaev is a rightful big favorite here. Locke, how do you feel?
I'm going to pretty much echo everything that you said, but I do have just slight concerns, right? The guy's been off for how long? Obviously, he had that COVID scare, even to the extent of retiring, right? Like he apparently was really fucked up by COVID. So I have a little bit of a concern what that could potentially do to him once he steps inside the cage, especially if he has to lean on his cardio here. Because, you know, Li Jingliang quite durable, I'd say, to a certain extent. I think his last finish came via Keita Nakamura choking him out about 5 years ago or so. So he's a little bit hard to put away. I do think that Chimaev will land the takedowns. Obviously, if you just even watch the Neil Magny fight, you'll see that the takedowns should come pretty easy here for Chimaev. But if he doesn't get him out of there in that first round, and I know Chimaev has finishes in the second round as well, but if he's not able to like complete takedowns, and he actually does have a bit of a cardio issue due to COVID or even from the past, like we haven't seen him go into a third round or anything like that. That's where my question lays with him. If he's extended, what does he look like, right? So I think the only way that I'm really approaching this fight is I'm just going to sprinkle Lee if this fight goes into the second round, because he'll probably be like plus 700, plus 800 by that time, especially considering where his pre-fight line is right now. Chimaev should win this fight. I think if you are looking to tackle him, you think that he's more than likely going to get Lee out of there quickly. The under 1.5 is roughly around even money. Maybe that's the spot that you try to look to tackle, or even in his inside the distance, which is minus 165. But my only question marks, and I need this answer before I can, you know, pay the money on Chimaev at minus 500 or whatever the fuck it is that cardio? Let me see that answer. Let me see that answer legitimately first, and then I'll be down to back him and call him the next coming of Jesus or whatever the hell people are calling him at this point. But I'm sold on him about 80%. Fill that 20% by making this fight go a little bit deeper and show me that you have the cojones to go out there. And, you know, the Leech, say what you want about the Leech, but when he is in the zone, the guy's stalking his opponents. He's marching them down and he's throwing big shots. And if Chimaev's not able to complete takedowns or anything, things could get a little bit hairy. So the pick is Chimaev first round TKO, ground and pound. But I have a little bit more pause for concern than what Liam is bringing on here, saying that he's 100% on the Chimaev boat on this side. So only live bet for me on Lee if he makes it out of the first round. And then that's just more so to answer questions on myself. And yeah, I'll take a little bit of a shot at plus 500, 600, 700 that he'll more than likely be going into round two. So Chimaev, round 1, TKO.
Rock and roll. Shawn, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, it's a pretty easy fight to break down. I just think that Lee has been taken down in previous spots, so I think his training is at the Shanghai PI. So I'm expecting Chimaev to just take him down and do whatever the heck he wants, whether it's TKO or sub. I'm going to have absolutely no action on the fight because the Chimaev fave is coming in the future. Chimaev is not the second coming of Christ, but his lines will always indicate it. So we'll just keep an eye out for the best spot to fade the man at. So I hope he kills Leach so he can keep that momentum going until he gets a really good opponent.
Fair enough, my man. And I think that could make a lot of sense too. Tajik, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep it short. I think Li Jingliang is gonna go ahead and submit him by flying Gogo Plata. I joke. This is gonna be a quick one. This Chimaev just is gonna take him down and pound him out. So it's gonna be Chimaev by TKO.
Plain and simple, guys. We are in agreement here. Unfortunately, like I said, if the Leech pulls it off, it'll be one for the ages. But I think Chimaev, the train will keep rolling. We've got next up Alexander Volkov, a man who's cashed me many a ticket in the heavyweight division, is taking on Marcin Tybura, a man who has cost me many a fade in the heavyweight division, leaving me with a conundrum. Do I bet this fight at all? And when I have been cashing Volkov historically, I've been cashing him oftentimes in that minus 175 range, whereas now we get that minus 275 number. It's a little less appealing. Tajik, we'll start with you on this one, my man. How do you feel about this matchup? Is this one that you're interested in from a betting perspective? What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting fight. When we talk about Tybura's ways of winning, I mean, I think it mostly resides in grappling. I think he would need to clinch, try to take Volkov down, and if they were against each other maybe a couple of years ago, I would have said Tybura has like a small chance in taking down Volkov and controlling him. But Volkov has since gained a lot of muscles. His takedown defense is actually pretty serviceable right now. What kind of skews his takedown defense is this Curtis Blade, like 24 takedowns that he was taking down, and even there, he was able to get up, and offer him a fight. So I think he's durable. I think standing up, he's gonna pick him apart. I don't know if he finishes Tybura, to be honest with you. I initially thought he does, but I think Volkov takes this one by decision. So far, I'm gonna take. I'm flipping between that and the TKO, and I think Volkov is a rightful favorite, and he should cruise through Tybura.
Awesome. My boy Locke says robot chicken wings. We got Chris in the chat says if Tybura doesn't get slept, he's always live for a win. Very possible, but he does so often get slept. Shawn, how do you feel about this one?
Yeah, I played Volkov. So I'm like you, Liam. I personally don't believe in Tybura. I think that Tybura's wins have been laughable, in my opinion. It's usually him just getting the absolute shit kicked out of him, and then him somehow securing a takedown and finishing the fight. Yeah, I bet Volkov at minus 275. I know it's not pretty, but I just think that Volkov is going to be able to keep this upright. I think he's going to be able to either point him or even honestly find a knockout. I mean, Tybura, his chin, it's not like it's that great. Like, he's still getting hurt in his fights. And Volkov is a hell of a problem to deal with. I mean, the guy is so long. So I am expecting with this larger cage, it's going to be a lot more difficult for Tybura to implement his game plan. And I do expect this to be a pretty big layup for Volkov, and I can finally put this fade to rest. Please.
Awesome. And, I largely agree with that take as well. Man, it's cost me money fading this guy before, but Volkov, I think, is the most reliable soldier. Betting Greg Hardy is a really tough spot. Whereas Volkov is pretty consistent, pretty reliable. And I think that overall, I don't know that I actually bet Greg Hardy, but it was one of those last.
I did.
and
he looked like Sugar Ray Leonard out there in round 1. He was absolutely destroying him. And then sure enough, the inhaler kicks in and Greg Hardy is death gassed. So Greg Hardy has cost me a bit of money. I keep getting tempted by these lines and his NFL athleticism. But I'm happy to see him lose because he's a terrible person.
I am right there with you on literally every one of those points, Shawn. Locke, how do you feel about this fight?
Tybura is an interesting one because I've had, action on him throughout his career, and it's been a little bit of both. I actually bet him against Greg Hardy, thinking that he'd be able to take that early onslaught and then come back and get the dub. I only pulled the trigger once he actually reached plus money. I think I hit him at plus 101, and that was enough for me to pull the trigger just because I wasn't that big on Greg Hardy myself. But man, he gets touched up in pretty much every single fight. His last 3 fights alone, he gets hurt pretty bad, but then get bailed out by like a takedown or his opponents just not being that good. Obviously, Greg Hardy being the one of those guys as well. He's just in over his head here against Volkov, though. I just don't think he's going to be able to land takedowns, and that's very much predicated as to how he will win this fight. Is he needs to mix in the takedown behind some striking, but I think it's going to be very difficult to do so. Like I know earlier on in Volkov's career, he's been held down by guys like Tim Johnson and such, and that's obviously not a good look. But you got to give them the credit in terms of they can still make improvements, and we've been seeing nothing but improvements from the Curtis Blades side here now, or sorry, from Volkov here. And the reason I said Curtis Blades is Curtis Blades went 14 of 25 on takedowns on him, meaning he's gotten up at least 13 or 14 times because his get-up game has definitely gotten better. And then on the feet, I think Volkov absolutely just touches him up here. I'm leaning Volkov inside the distance. Volkov KO, obviously. I'd be surprised if he subbed him, if he comes out with a fucking Darce choke or something like that with his long limbs. But I think he goes out there, throws out his teep kick every now and then, really touches up the body of Tybura, and then lets his hands go. Tybura, I've seen some love for Tybura on the Twitter timeline, and I'm just like, what are people seeing that I'm not seeing? Like, do they really think it's going to be that easy for Tybura to lock up some takedowns here? And I get it. Like maybe some of that argument has to do with the fact that he's such a big underdog in this spot. But man, it's going to be very difficult for him to get him down, and if he does get him down, I think it's going to be even harder for him to hold Volkov down. So I like Volkov. He's like either my most confident or second most confident spot. I parlayed him with Duraev. That's my lock of the night play right there. I did Duraev plus Volkov 5 units at minus 122. More than happy with that line. I think both guys roll in this spot. I'm just trying to think of a way that Tybura wins this fight, and like I don't even know if like Hail Mary KO is on the bucket list there. Like I just don't think he's going to be able to do that. So I got I got Volkov second round KO.
I love it. And yeah, the line that stands out to me here is pretty straightforward. Just Volkov by KO at plus 150. I think it's possible that Volkov will go to a decision, but I think oftentimes that's when he's striking with somebody he respects as a striker. And I don't think that he will respect, Tybura here as a striker. I think he will be able to walk him down with impunity, a la Walt Harris, a la some of the other fights that Volkov's had. It's just, I think that the Greg Hardy fight going to decision is the one that leaves you with something to be desired. But again, Greg Hardy's kind of snappy with the jab, and that was the only fight where there was no grappling at all, and he didn't look completely death gassed. My question was that I don't know that he's ever been to a jiu-jitsu class because literally the second he was underneath another man, he was panicked. He was like, it's all over. And like, you could see the look on his face. He wasn't even getting hurt by the punches. He was like, it was like he was on a roller coaster ride or something. So I do think that Volkov's going to roll here in all likelihood. I like him in the spot. Don't know if I'm going to get behind the money line. But minus 280, minus 290, that's almost a playable range. I'd like to see it tick back down to that minus 265, minus 275 if I want to play, but we'll wait and see. I'm going to probably have a small share on the Volkov KO line. Next up, we've got, maybe the least competitive fight on the main card, depending on your perspective. We've got Dan Hooker, obviously a step up in competition for Islam Makhachev, but Islam Makhachev looks like the goods in a lot of ways. He's got pretty excellent top positional control. He's been able to work over jiu-jitsu black belt Thiago Moises. That was pretty impressive to me, honestly, that he worked him over on the ground so easily. I think it had a lot to do with cardio and pace, but still, I think that Islam is a pretty impressive character. We're going to kick it to my man Shawn first. We'll mix up the order once again. Shawn, how do you feel about this matchup? Do you think there's any value on the dog? What do you like here?
I mean, there's definitely value on Hooker here if you're looking at the line, but it's just a matter of if you're going to play it or not. So for me, I played Hooker against Nasrat because that was the biggest layup of all time. But I don't know, man. Like, Makhachev is very good at avoiding damage, and he's very good at taking the fight into his realm. This is going to be the toughest wrestler that Dan Hooker's ever faced. I just feel like this has Makhachev decision written all over it. It's probably not going to be a playable fight for me, but I'm not going to be shocked if Hooker lands a miraculous knee with him coming in. I mean, Hooker's striking acumen is definitely going to be a hell of a lot higher than Makhachev's. It's just, I feel like it's very predictable that this fight is going to end up on the mat and Makhachev will grind a decision. That's my take.
Fair enough. And I think that that's going to be a lot of people's take too. I think it makes a lot of sense to me. Tajik, how do you feel?
Yeah, it's I mean, you saw me betting like every underdog under the sun, in this card. I'm not gonna pick Hooker. I mean, at this time, it's just like I can't just because I feel like I agree with Shawn that there's some value with Hooker. I understand this line is gonna be crazy wide, and actually like maybe at plus 1,500, like Hooker can go that, and then you can bet him. I don't mind, but it's just we have to be realistic here. I think Makhachev takes him down. I actually see potentially a late finish, to be honest with you. I thought like that it could go to a decision, but I think one thing Makhachev understands is that in order to get the title shot, he needs. I think he needs a finish. And I think he needs to win impressively against Hooker. And what we also know that Hooker, I think, Hooker is kind of a jump start to title fights, right? I mean, look at Chandler. Chandler came, just beat Hooker. That's it. You get a title fight. That's it, right? So the logic is there, but he needs to finish him convincingly. And if he can do that convincingly, then I think he probably can get a title shot. So yeah, I'm gonna pick Makhachev here, and I'm gonna take him by third round submission. Here you go.
Boom, there it is. Tajik is thinking that it's gonna play out a little bit like that Drew Dober fight. That also makes a lot of sense to me. Makhachev round 3 decision is probably something I will look at from a prop perspective. I would be stunned if the books aren't hip to it. Locke, how do you feel about this one?
I'm so jealous of some of you guys down there in the States that have access to like FanDuel and DraftKings and shit, and they have those cool props. Like I don't get any of that up here unless somebody in the comment section knows of something up in Canada that I can get some of those odds. That would be nice. But yeah, I'll keep this one pretty short here. Not a good look for Daniel Hooker to be going to taking this fight, the toughest fight of his career, on short notice. Obviously doing a favor for the UFC here. You got to be like living, eating, and sleeping on the fucking wrestling mats if you're going up against a guy like Islam Makhachev, and obviously he's not going to be doing that here. I think even though Hooker is up at plus 500, plus 550, obviously it would be stupid to play a prop on him here, just considering that underdog money on him. But I really think you're leaving money on the table if you just don't take him by KO at plus 1,100, as that's probably his best way to win this fight. Makhachev has obviously gotten way more defensively sound since he got knocked out by Adriano Martins earlier in his UFC career, and he's pretty much pitched a flawless career since then. But I really think that's the only way Hooker wins this fight. Catches him maybe with a knee on the inside when he's trying to close distance and get a takedown. Outside of that, makes no sense to me. So yeah, Makhachev, I'm going to go decision, but I am not confident enough on a specific prop here to be like, okay, I'm going to go balls deep on decision Makhachev. But I like Makhachev here, and he should cruise. No resistance.
Boom. There it is. The panel is pretty unanimous here. Unfortunately, I like Dan Hooker. I think pretty highly of him, but I just think that this is a really tough stylistic matchup for him. Haven't seen him face this kind of stylistic matchup much before. We've honestly seen him turn to his wrestling a lot of times to bail him out in some recent fights, including the Dustin Poirier fight, including the Nasrat fight. So I think that, he's not going to have that option here. And one of the things that really concerns me about this matchup is just the Chandler fight backed himself onto the fence routinely. So, that is not a good look here against a powerful, dominant wrestler, unless he knees him up the middle on the way in and then catches a guillotine or some crazy shit. Again, that's if the leech knocks out Khamzat in the first 30 seconds. Then what you'll see next is Dan Hooker submitting him with a guillotine choke in the first round. But otherwise, I think that this is probably going to be Islam getting the win. But with that, guys, we can move to the title fight portion of the event. And man, what a tremendous fight this will be. Cory Sandhagen and Petr, if you'd prefer. I think that this is going to be tremendous violence. Two guys that like to bang, two guys that like to stand, two guys that like to throw, two guys that throw at pretty good volume. What I think is potentially a difference maker here is that Sandhagen is a volume machine. He's constantly pumping out volume, constantly switching his stance, his footwork, his angles, proven now that he could do it for 25 minutes. And that was in a fight that was pretty labor intensive. He's getting wrestled the whole time. TJ Dillashaw wanted to just keep a hold of him because he was getting tuned up a little bit at space. Not the whole fight, but for large portions of the fight. So I think that Cory Sandhagen has a lot to offer here. I think that Petr Yan is tremendous. He hurt Aldo bad with body shots. He's got excellent work when he gets somebody to the ground. He's got pretty decent wrestling, as he showed off in his last fight. Didn't use it to establish control, so it's hard to know exactly how to rate it, but he was throwing Aljo around. Granted, I think Aljo was having like a physical body-wide meltdown in that fight over the course of the fight, which I think explains the franticness of his pace and how he was slowing down over the course of it. I don't think that's going to happen again. I think that if they rematch, it will be an interesting fight because Aljo won't be fighting like such a spaz, though he does fight in a crazy, flamboyant way normally. But man, I think that this is a very compelling matchup. I do think that this is, a similarly competitive matchup. Obviously, Aljo has more grappling credentials and a better path in terms of the grappling was expected for that fight. But I think that sometimes what happens is when somebody gets one fight canceled and another fight rebooked, they just move the line from one to the other. And, we saw that Petr ran through Aljo. And so people wanted minus 225, minus 250 or whatever they were betting on him when that matchup was booked. And then since Petr has been, since Cory has been the replacement, Cory is like plus 225. I don't buy that. If this is a striking matchup, especially, I find it very hard to believe that Jan's going to pay off that price. He's had competitive minutes with a lot of guys in the UFC on the feet. Jimmy Rivera, Jose Aldo. It's not just one guy. John Dodson dropped him on the feet. So Cory Sandhagen, who's been pretty exceptionally good on the feet, we're going to say he has no chance there. If Yan decides to wrestle, I'll be a little surprised, but I'll be impressed because I think that that's the smarter way to approach this fight. Cory has a hard time dealing with that. Sometimes he gets a little complacent, looking for Kimuras, looking for, things to get somebody to let go rather than just forcing a break with underhooks like a normal wrestler would. I think that if Cory has a wise game plan here, he's going to try and stay away from him, line up one of those flying knees, line up some kicks from the outside, touch him up with more volume, and make it a greasy, competitive 25 minutes. And I think in that fight, he's very live to win. I also think there's KO potential on both sides. I think that this is a live wire type matchup. These guys are going to be swinging hard and heavy. Yan is a power puncher. He's committed when he throws in combination and he can hit pretty damn hard. Cory's a savage though. And, I forget off the top of my head, the gentleman's name now. What's the fight that he's like basically on the brink of getting his arm broken and finds a way to kill that guy like 30 seconds later? Yuri Alcantara. What a tremendous display of heart where most people are done, guys. His arm is like on the verge of hyperextending. He's bleeding all out of his face. He hasn't had a second of success. and he gets out and pissed off in a rage, slams the guy with ground and pound, and it's over like 20 seconds later. So I think that Cory Sandhagen is not to be taken lightly. And I think that he's very live at the plus 225 tag. I got my action on it. Plus 225, Cory Sandhagen. Let's ride, baby. Locke, how do you feel?
Yeah, when we have these like dominant champions, people just build up this mystique about them that they can never lose, right? Like we had it recently with Davison Figueiredo. We had it with Israel Adesanya when he fought Jan Blachowicz. He was like a minus 245 favorite in that fight, ended up losing, right? People just look at it from like a wide scope, or they're just like, oh, look at all these wins this guy has, and then some of them coming in quite dominant fashion as well, where he's able to like knock out or TKO Jose Aldo the way that he did, beat almost beat Aljamain Sterling the way that he did. But I think that the narrative from that Aljamain Sterling fight is kind of clouding the judgment of a lot of people. And I don't even know if a lot of people have gone back and watched that fight. Like Liam, I know you're talking about if Aljo came in with a slightly different game plan, he probably would be a little bit more successful. But I thought that was the correct game plan. That's kind of why I picked him even going into that fight, where I'm like, he needs to throw volume and output. Go ahead, Liam.
Just to be clear, I don't mean his game plan. I mean specifically his physical approach to the fight. I think that he's talked about in interviews, he was doing some kind of water loading. He was in between transitions of coaches. Like he was working with the Serra Longo guys and then Couture. So I think that he botched his weight cut completely. And I think that's why he looked and felt like shit in the fight. But that is me trying to read between the lines of Aljo's explanation post-fight. So it could have a little bit of fighter talk in there. But that being said, that's what I saw. Aljo has tremendous cardio and looked like shit 6 minutes into the fight.
Yeah, but I truly thought that was the best game plan, to go out there and beat a guy like Jan. Just put the pressure on him, because you see him time and time again when he, not pressure, but like output. Just put output on him. And there's so many times where he just gets caught standing and just waiting for his opportunity to actually explode and get his strikes off. It happened in the Jimmy Rivera fight. It happened in the Jose Aldo fight, specifically that second round. It happened in the Aljo fight, second round as well. And who is good at just that, but has the cardio to withstand that for 25 minutes if he needs to? Mr. Cory Sandhagen. I think we have the perfect archetype of a guy to beat Petr Yan here. And, people just don't want to hear it if they're on the Petr Yan side. They probably already have him parlayed in like 50 Hail Mary parlays at this point in time. But man, Cory Sandhagen is absolutely live in this spot. If he can stay at distance and just get his output going, I think that's very good for him. And then obviously maybe setting up some traps for those flying knees and stuff like that. I think that's absolutely live for him too. I think the only way Petr Yan covers his price tag is if he implements the grapple heavy approach. If he goes out there, lands some shots on the feet, but then goes out there and tries to grapple, get this guy to the ground and maybe control him. That's the only way I see him covering minus 200. Because if this turns out to be a kickboxing fight for 25 minutes, the output of Cory Sandhagen is going to be very difficult for the judges to overlook in this spot. And again, Petr Yan has lost rounds in the past because of lack of output and kind of just getting caught staring at his opponent. Again, I don't like doing this a lot, but like the Jimmy Rivera fight, I'm going to bring that up. The first 2 rounds, right? Jimmy Rivera probably winning that the first 4 to 4.5 minutes of that fight, just based off of output and activity and volume. And then Petr Yan catches him at the end with a knockdown. Like, a knockdown is quite high variance, if you want to call it that, right? Like you have to really be like perfect shot, perfect timing, precision, all that type of stuff. And he was able to catch Jimmy Rivera, who just kept going up against the cage at the end of the round and then end up getting caught. But like, if he didn't get knocked down at the end of one of those 2 rounds, he won the 3rd round on 2 judges' scorecards. He could have easily won that fight. So there's too many high variance spots for Yan, even though he looks so dominant in some of his fights. Obviously, he's finishing Aldo late in the fight. He's almost finishing Aljo late in the fight. But now you have a guy that's not gonna take a back step and not a back step, but won't be deflated come round 3 and 4, because he's gonna have the cardio to go out there and put that pace and output on Yan. So I took the shot, 1 unit shot at plus 205 on Cory Sandhagen. It seems like a no-brainer shot for me. You can't convince me pre-fight that the line should be this wide. If it is a 25-minute kickboxing fight, as most of Petr Yan's fights are, they take place on the feet. This is going to be a close motherfucking fight, and I'd rather be on the plus 205 side than the minus 245. So yeah, Sandhagen decision for me. I'm seeing a lot of people saying Sandhagen knockout. Sure, he's a master at kind of trapping people and kind of guiding them into his own knockouts, but I'd be surprised if he traps Petr Yan in the feet in something. So I'm going to say Sandhagen decision. volume output, stay away from the wrestling, hopefully, and then he'll be able to take that win. So yeah, I'm on the Sandhagen side here.
Boom. All right. So we got 2 of us on Cory Sandhagen on the panel. And again, guys, these aren't picks. These are bets. We're trying to make valuable plays here. You know, if I had to make a slight lean, it would be towards Jan. But, you know, I'm not making a lean. I'm not making a pick. I'm making a bet here. And at plus 225, I think the betting odds were in my favor. Now, Shawn, how do you feel about this one? Do you tend to agree?
Yeah, I agree with you guys. So I did bet Sandhagen already, and I feel like pre Sandhagen versus Dillashaw, the common consensus was that Sandhagen was going to be the toughest fight for Jan, and suddenly the line is so wide after a fight where there was such a heavy grappling element. Now, obviously, Jan showed very high grappling acumen in his last fight against Elizeu. But if we're looking at this as both a fight and also as a game, you have to really factor in the game element of the fight for this fight, because Sandhagen is going to be able to score a lot of points. He is very long, and Petr Yan waits all the time. He waits. Now, if we put the 2 guys on the Tiger Muay Thai floor in the gym, we put some boxing gloves on them, and we let them spar, I'm pretty confident that Petr Yan is going to win that fight, because Petr Yan just has a very dense and natural knowledge to him when it comes to reading his opponents, being able to find the angles, download their tendencies, and capitalize on them. That's why I can't take a lot away from the fact that he did get those knockdowns in the Jimmy Rivera fight. But that being said, they are low probability things to happen in a fight. And if we're looking at a fight as a game, I do think that Sandhagen will be able to score more points in that game, keep his range, and not get touched in the same way as Jan's previous opponents. So I personally believe it's an absolute no-brainer to play Sandhagen here, but I am curious to hear what Tajik has to say.
Awesome. I am too. Tajik, how do you feel about this one?
I feel great about this fight. I actually think Lineker, like I'm reading comment section. Sandhagen, Sandhagen is actually a decent opponent, like for Petr. I don't agree with the odds here. In a lot of ways, I think it's a close fight. And if you bet, Sandhagen at plus 220, or plus 225, I mean. Good luck. I think yes, Sandhagen is a value side here. He's this line should be closer. I agree with that. And I think this is another moment where you will take the last fights of both fighters in order to try to complete the picture, right? With Cory, Dillashaw fight was very grappling, very wrestling ridden, and he got in trouble, right? And then with Petr and the Elizeu fight, right? I think it's also an outlier of some sorts, right? It was just, and so there's a lot of public sentiment that Jan has to, run through Cory, but it's largely going to be a stand-up fight. I don't expect them to go to the ground or try to grapple with each other, and I think it's a very close fight at that. I think Sandhagen is a good DraftKings pick, right? In the DraftKings show, I actually picked him up, and I think he has a chance there. He's cheap, great value. I would absolutely play him on DraftKings. But I'm gonna lean towards Jan. I think Jan. I don't know if he finishes him, to be honest with you, but I think he's fine the ways to victory. The only thing he needs to be wary of, I think, is those flying knees. I would love him not to catch one. Yeah, and having said that, let's not get under illusion. Like I don't want people to fall into this Dominic Reyes trap also, right? Like after this John Jones fight, everybody thought he's just going to be back and he's going to be a champion. I've said this before. This is the same thing, type of mentality that people might employ when they're looking into Jan. Like, he's a deserved champion. He's got to be there. He has to win. He's going to run through Cory. But Sandhagen is not a joke. I think he is going to be Jan's biggest test to date. And I think he's going to put up a great fight. And it's going to be much closer than the odds suggest. So I think Jan wins, but I think Cory definitely is a value play here. I'm gonna pick pick Jan by round 5 TKO. I think that would be my official prediction.
Now the real question, Tajik, is do we go over or under 4.5 rounds?
Oof. Is there odds available for that? I'm gonna tease Manpreet a little bit. They offer the type of odds here.
I think there are right now under 4.5 rounds plus 112 is the best available on 5 dimes, and under over is minus 132 on 5 dimes.
And under is what?
Plus 112.
Why would I bet any of this? This is peanuts. I want them Lambo bets. I don't care about those, minus 100, plus 200. I mean,
shout out Narco Cop.
Yeah, Narco Cop, if you're watching, this one is for you. So let's go. Petr Jan by TKO round 4 or 5. But either of those are viable. I think he's just gonna put this hellacious pace on Sandhagen, and at some point, I think Cory would have to yield. That would be my official prediction.
Awesome. And so if you are on the Tajik side, and more specifically, I think if you're just on the Jan side in this matchup, 4-5 decision. If you have access to FanDuel Sportsbook, seems like a really good way to target this. I know, I'm so sorry, Locke. I'm so sorry. I just wanted to tell the people watch it just in case, but I know it's absolute brutality. I used to be the same way, man. I was competing against just Bet Online. I was like, no wonder I'm getting smoked. These guys are sharp over here. But I will move us right along. Yeah, absolutely. Somebody got something?
No, I'm just going to put this crazy prop bets and tag Manpreet every time. I mean, what else do I have to do? I'm just going to have this level of fun. So I think it's...
Damn you, Tajik. Damn you.
Well, folks, I know that some of you guys are waiting to tune over to the PFL, so appreciate you rocking with us to the end here. We got 21 people still rocking with us live. Appreciate each and every one of you. And we have the main event of the evening. Maybe one of the most, if not historically, the most undervalued underdog in UFC history. Jan Blachowicz finally gets his reign as a minus 300 favorite. Who would have thought they'd see the day? Not me. So I actually have a small play on Glover, if I'm being fair. I locked it in a long time ago, but it's still been tracked on BetMMA. I didn't want to change it. It's fine by me. Man, I think that Glover, if he gets on top, is going to be a real problem for Jan in this matchup because Glover's top game is excellent. He does a tremendous job of balancing damage and throwing strikes with submitting people and putting them in danger and getting advantageous positions. So I think that Glover, if he gets on top, is going to be a real problem. Now, with that being said, I also bet on Israel against Jan. Potentially, I'm overlooking this guy. That being said, though, going back further, I was cashing tickets on Jan. I cashed ticket on him against Rockhold, against Reyes. I think both of those were underdog shots. So it's not like I don't like the guy. I think Jan Blachowicz is very good. It really blew me away that he beat Israel like that, but I thought size played a huge factor in that fight. Glover's a lifelong light heavyweight. I don't have any problem with Glover's size in this matchup. Glover's been competing with these young bucks, right? These big young guys and still faring pretty well, broadly speaking. Even against Thiago Santos when he was hurt. Like, Glover has this ability to get hurt and recover in ways that are just remarkable for somebody of his age category, right? Normally, recoverability is one of the things that you lose with age, and still at an advanced age out there taking shots to the dome, wrestling through positions, and then submitting you while he's hurt. Unbelievable. I think that this guy has literally traded his whole life for this opportunity. He's getting a second one. I'm willing to take the dog shot on him at plus 225. I think that Jan Blachowicz is a deserving favorite here. But again, guys, this is a guy who's been favored like twice in his UFC career. I could go back and double check. Maybe it's 3 times, right? He's been an underdog in almost every fight he's ever been booked in. Obviously, the market's been undervaluing him historically. You think the market's still undervaluing him? No, because he's been an underdog in every fight in his whole damn career, and now he's minus 300. So I don't buy it. I think it's a little bit of an overcorrection. I think that if this fight happened 2 years ago, the line would be significantly closer. But granted, Glover's old. He's 41. This could just be a knockout in the first round type of ordeal. I hope it's not. I think that Glover, if he extends the fight a little bit and gets into some grappling situations, makes it interesting. But even so, Glover has a decent bit of power on the feet, not to say he's going to be matching up speed for speed with Jan. That's absolutely not going to happen, but he still packs a punch, and power is one of the last things to go. Jan is not above being dinked. Even in the Thiago Santos fight, it was kind of like a low output standoff until he ran onto a punch. So I don't know. I'm just not sold on him as this massive favorite, but I do totally believe that Jan is a deserving favorite. I think that he's an excellent champion. I just think Glover Teixeira still got something for him at 41 years of age. I think Glover has strengths in the areas where he's shown historical weaknesses, and potentially he's shown that up. But the Cory Anderson rematch, we didn't get to see it play out. We don't know if he's actually better than Cory at wrestling now. He knocked him stiff, almost killed him. God bless him. But it's like, outside of that, I don't know that I'm as sold on the wrestling and grappling of Jan Blachowicz against other light heavyweights. We'll get a chance to see it this Saturday. With that being said, I'm going to kick it to my man, Locke. How do you feel about this matchup? Are you riding with me on my old horse one last time to the show, or are you kicking me off the horse right now and saying, Liam, what are you thinking?
Trust me, the fan in me is completely on Liam's side right now. I want to see Glover Teixeira go out there in 2021 and capture a title and maybe even just ride off into the sunset off that. Like, how do you top a career after that, especially given everything that he's been through, just to even get into the UFC? That's been absolutely crazy. But man, luckily for him, over his last couple of fights, he's had a couple of things to lean on: cardio advantage, wrestling advantage, jiu-jitsu advantage. Even when he's getting rocked, he's going out there and still landing takedowns and getting himself out of trouble. I'm not sure if he'll have as much success doing that here against Blachowicz, who's pretty well-rounded and has a pretty damn good gas tank himself. I don't think he's going to be slowing down, or, if he has Glover hurt, I don't think his cardio is going to come into play in terms of him getting taken down like the Thiago Santos fight. If Glover gets top position, it's trouble, right? Blachowicz is a pretty good jiu-jitsu player himself, but it's very difficult to deal with a guy that has the top crushing pressure of a Glover and just passes as well as he does and just sets up submissions, especially that arm triangle, as well as he does. But I think that we're going to see Blachowicz clip him at some point early here. And I do think that he'll end up going down, which is crazy to say, right? Blachowicz never really used to be a finisher, but now he's out here finishing guys left, right, and center. And I think he'll be able to do the same thing here against Glover. So I'm not willing to pay the crazy money on him or the line that he's currently sitting at. I think that is a little bit egregious at this point, and we have to give Glover some love. But I just don't see it, man. I think that Blachowicz is going to catch him with something at some point, and he's going to go down. So value plays, obviously, on the Glover side. I absolutely agree with that. But I think Blachowicz still finds a way to get his hand raised, more than likely by KO. So, yeah, I'm on the Blachowicz side, but the fan in me is all over Glover. If I had a Glover t-shirt, I'd be wearing it right now. But hopefully Glover wins. I don't want any action on this fight because I want Glover to win, but I am picking Blachowicz to win.
That's my tagline for this fight now. All over Glover.
Did somebody say t-shirt?
Speaking of which, you'll be able to find that in the description box below as soon as this video is over. I got to edit that in, make sure that we're giving full credit and respect to my man Tajik and the wonderful t-shirt that I'll be donning on this podcast very soon. Don't you worry.
Yeah, no.
Locke, did you have anything? Oh, sorry.
Just go ahead.
You're all good, Locke? All right,
yeah,
Shawn, you're ready to go then, brother. How do you feel about this one? Am I crazy for taking the dog shot on a 41-year-old?
No, you're not crazy. So for me, I feel like people are getting a bit of fool's gold here with Jan. I feel like he's had quite a bit of good success here, but I think Glover is going to be one of the more complete fighters that he's faced in the grappling realm. I know with 100% certainty from talking with people close to Glover's camp that he's going to be very ready for this fight. So like Locke said, it took everything in the world to get him to the UFC. Us old school people, we know that he used to be Chuck Liddell's main sparring partner back in the day before he got into the UFC. I think there's obviously some durability concerns here, but I just think that Glover's the guy who finds a way to win. I don't think it's Jan is the guy who finds a way to win. Jan is actually a guy who, in the past, in my opinion, has found a way to lose. So if I had to choose a dog, I want a dog who fights like a dog. So that's why I'm personally choosing Glover, and I'll definitely have a little bit of action on him for this fight. I haven't locked in anything yet because I do think that there's going to be some more money coming in on the Blachowicz side. But yeah, what an interesting fight. And it's probably the oldest title fight that we've ever seen. I mean, don't forget, Jan is old too. He's like 38 years old. So it's not like he's a spring chicken in there, but he's definitely on some good supplements. So I understand why he's a favorite.
I love it. I love it. Tajik, how do you feel?
I think Jan Blachowicz is natty. You know, that would be my kind of
definitely not.
So that's the first thing. But I think, you know, I don't think it's gonna be a hot take to be honest in any ways. But I think this is gonna be Glover's final fight in the UFC. And I think this is going to be his retirement fight. I think it's very possible that we're going to see him taking down the gloves, and you know, he's up there. You know, the only stats that I need to look at probably is over 40 stats in the win rate. You know, and then things become more clear to me. But just in general, when Jan Blachowicz came to UFC, I thought he's going to be a champion one day. It was the set of those unfortunate losses that was like he lost to Cory Anderson. I thought, did he lose to Thiago Santos? I think also it was just crazy. I couldn't apprehend those losses. But I think in general he lived up to his expectations in the UFC, and he surprised a lot of people, but not me. I agree with Shawn that Glover is a very complete fighter, and I think he's the most complete fighter that Jan has ever faced. But at the same time, I mean, he hasn't been taken down in a long time, and I think, you know, even if he has, his takedown defense, his grappling defense is pretty serviceable, and standing up is just. I think Glover's chin can be a liability at some, and we've seen him rocked, wobbled on many occasions, and Jan is gonna be there the whole time, right? So it's just the ways to victory for Glover, I believe, are so limited, and hence the odds. I think the odds are accurate here, and you're hearing this from a guy who bet like 25 underdogs on the 15 fight card, right? Like I would love, like, as a fan, I think, you know. Manpreet actually said it right. You know, it's like, as a fan, I would love to hear to pick Glover here, but I just can't. And I think my official prediction, Jan Blachowicz by retirement. He's just gonna retire. That's it.
Oh, goodness. And with that, guys, we have done it. 15 fights, top to bottom. We got a little bit of a late start. We made it all the way through. We missed Chris Wade getting dominated to a 50-45 on the PFL. So it looks like we didn't miss that much. But now, as I tune over to Twitter, I'm seeing an absolute barn burner of a heavyweight fight, it seems like. So got a lot to catch up on. Thank you guys so much to all my great guests for making this show what it is. Could not pull it off without you guys, and especially this week, being a little flexible with me as I made some critical production errors at the beginning. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it big time. And if you guys are watching live, appreciate you too. Still got 18 people rocking live with us all the way to the end. God bless you all for that. So without further ado, I'm going to kick it over to each one of my guests so they can let you know where you can find them in the future and any closing comments they have on the show today. MMA Lock of the Night, my man. Man, Preet, thank you, brother. You did a wonderful job your first appearance on the show.
I appreciate it, Liam, and I'm always down to come on if you give me enough notice, which you more than likely did for this time around. I think you hit me up like 3 weeks ago, and you're like, "Get your ass on my show." I'm down, brother. I'm always down to do it. But yeah, you guys pretty much know where to find me at MMA LOTN on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. That's pretty much all I'm going to plug this time around. All I'm going to say is war Abigail Montez in this next fight, and that's really about it. Let's fucking go, Shawn. I know you're on her as well.
War Abigail Montez for my man Locke, for my man Shawn. Let the people know where they can find you, brother.
Abigail is going to do it for all of us who bet on Brittany Elkin. I had so much money on Brittany Elkin. God damn it. Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at Shawn Orr. And then I also have a website. It's www.sharpmma.com. I post up my best bets. I usually post them up about Thursday or Friday. So if you just want some very safe, accurate betting advice, definitely check that out. If you follow me on Twitter, you're going to see that article posted up. And I wish everybody luck with the rest of the PFL. And go Montez! Montez gang!
Let's go.
Go Montez. I have no action on that fight, but go Montez for my boys. Tajik, what do you got here, brother?
He's going to say Shields. He's on fucking Clarissa Shields, probably.
No, I'm not going to comment on Clarissa. She's going to block me on Twitter if I did.
Shields by sub round 1.
She's going to watch this tape like, the other hundreds of thousands of our fans and block me on Twitter. But, in all honesty, like we're going up against, Bellator, I say PFL, like our broadcast. I mean, so I think our attendance that we have today is great. A lot of familiar faces. Thanks you guys for joining yet again, and thanks to Liam to putting these shows together. It's always great to be on the show. The vibe is great. We have great takes, great picks, great guests all the time. So I'm happy to be back yet again. And you can find me on Twitter at Tajik Bay. And like I always say, if you decide to follow me, there is no unfollow button. So make sure you make a sound decision before you decide to follow me.
You're either all in, or you're all out. So we appreciate my man Tajik Bey coming by once again to bless the people with some knowledge. All my guests, thank you guys so much. And guys, I am the worst person on YouTube for doing this, but go ahead and like this video. If you haven't done it already, go ahead and get subscribed to the channel. I'm going to have to go ahead and stand on my soapbox for just 1 second to say this show has been giving out free picks since September 1st, plus 70 units worth of free picks given out on this show. That's all I'm going to say, guys. God bless. I hope you tune in again next week. I'm going to bring back another sharp panel. We're going to have all the same fun again. Thank you once again to my sponsor, PrizePicks. Appreciate each and every one of you guys for tuning in. Till next time, back again, same fun. My goodness.